So I'll call for attendance. It appears that we're all here in the room. So all councillors and mayor are in attendance this morning. Do we have any apologies from the room? No. Let's go straight into declarations of interest on any matters of the agenda. Do any councillors have declaration of interest to declare? That's a no. So moving on to agenda item number 1, Cameron Park Swifts Leagues Club Limited. I have had quite a few discussions with fellow councillors and the mayor with regards to this particular agenda item, and upon late submissions from the community and detailed conversations that we've been having, it appears that we don't have the requisite information to move forward to make a decision on this. So I will move that we place this matter on the table and await further information to come to light. So I move that we put this agenda item on the table. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Mayor Harding. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. Any discussion with regards to doing that? Everyone's in agreement? Perfect.
Are you going to put it? Did you put it?
Put to the vote.
So,
Put to the vote.
oh well, sorry, may I put that to the vote? So all in favour? The vote is unanimous and moved.
Got through the first one.
Thank you, Councillor Tully. Okay, so we'll move straight into agenda item number 2, Ipswich Central to Springfield Central, affectionately known as the I2S, Public Transport Corridor, the Strategic Assessment and Infrastructure Australia Stage 1 submission. I'd just like to call the relevant council officer to the lectern, and while I'm doing that, I'll ask for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Ireland, and a seconder. Thank you, Mayor Harding. Just while we wait for the council officer to take the lectern, I think it might be appropriate to mention how significant this project actually is with the extreme growth that our city is having, particularly in the Ripley and Springfield area. There couldn't be a more important regionally significant project for us to be championing as a new council. And this item speaks to the strategic movements in helping us get the requisite funding from state and federal government as well. So it's nice to have a strategy in place so that we are clear with our movements moving forward, and how we actually bring this project to fruition. It's not something that we can run to the papers and announce overnight and it will be built next year. This is a long, gruelling process that we'll go through, but it's an important step that we will take, and we look forward to all of the challenges ahead in trying to unlock the population of the eastern suburbs and get the population moving through public transport into Ipswich City. So if you'd just like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Dan Heenan. I'm the Coordinator of Major Projects and Advocacy in the Office of Economic Development. So this is a report concerning the Ipswich Central to Springfield Central Public Transport Corridor, the Strategic Assessment and the Infrastructure Australia Stage 1 submission. Infrastructure pre-investment planning by state and federal governments is guided by a series of sequential business cases. The strategic assessment is the first stage, options assessment, and then detailed business case. A project is required to go through the 3 stages in order to obtain government funding and support to deliver the project. In recognition of the importance of this project to the city and to expedite that pre-investment planning, in late 2019, Council engaged and funded PwC to undertake the strategic assessment. The report was finalised in June 2020, and recommendations today are for Council to review and note the strategic assessment, as well as the Infrastructure Australia Stage 1 submission. It is also recommended today that Council notes the project will be the subject of a targeted advocacy campaign to attract funding and support to progress to the options assessment stage. The strategic assessment attached to the report today provides an understanding of the problems and opportunities, the service need, the costs and benefits, as well as a long list of options for further assessment. Frankly, the strategic assessment provides a compelling case for the infrastructure. It is clear that without a mass transit solution, there are going to be some significant impacts on the community and on the economy, including excessive congestion costing, or expected to cost up to $1 billion per annum by 2036, and Ripley residents enduring a 2.5-hour morning commute. The report recommends 4 options be taken forward for further consideration, being heavy rail, light rail, trackless trams and bus rapid transit. And finally, I would just like to note that community consultation on this project has only been undertaken by DTMR to date, and that was firstly back in 2006, when the project was originally introduced. It is understood more recently that directly affected residents have been engaged by DTMR associated with land corridor acquisition. There is no requirement to undertake community consultation as part of the strategic assessment stage, but it will be a requirement of the next stage of the process. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions out there? I guess, do we have any, at the moment with the options analysis, I guess it's important to ascertain the community sentiment around this as to which mode of rail we choose. It seems like there's been lots of discussion around heavy rail being the pragmatic approach, but the cost effectiveness of that obviously might weigh us down into choosing other options. So in your preparation of the options analysis, at what point do you think we will understand more about our options in that space and which one will be better for us?
So I guess the 4 options that have been put forward here for further assessment were essentially put through an assessment process, and cost was a key consideration of that. Certainly heavy rail came out as one of the more cost, not prohibitive, but one of the higher cost options associated with, particularly relative to those other options. However, I guess it was felt by the group and by PwC at the time that heavy rail, the benefits of, I suppose, the speed that comes with a heavy rail service in particular, was enough, at least at that preliminary stage, to potentially offset some of those cost impacts. So essentially, the options assessment stage is really about testing those options and doing the deeper dive. And usually what happens at the end of the options assessment stage is there will be 2 options then taken forward into the detailed business case stage. And cost will be a big part of that.
Thank you. Mayor Harding?
Mr. Hannon, thank you very much. I was actually really impressed with this business case. I've read a lot of them. This is quite a comprehensive one, so thank you for that. Knowing that this is passenger, which level of government would normally look after the funding for this kind of transport?
So in terms of the delivery of the infrastructure itself down the track, the federal government will have a big part to play. However, the next stage of the business case process is one that's usually led by the state. So it's essentially going to be a project that's going to require everyone to be on board. So far, we've had really good buy-in from the state in terms of their participation in the development and progression of this business case, which has been really good. TMR, their rail planning team, is on board. Excuse me. And we have a presentation to the federal government tomorrow, to Infrastructure Australia, where we hope to sort of garner their support also. But essentially, it's going to be a team effort to get this over.
So this options analysis is going to cost around, is it $2 million?
Correct, yeah.
And then the third and final business case, is that around $3 million, or what will be the cost of that one?
I'm expecting that to be sort of north of $5 million.
North of...
Yeah, it's I mean, the detailed business case stage is when you're doing the detailed design on the track, you know, you've got all your stations designed, you know, and then everything can then be costed accordingly.
Okay.
So there's a lot of work involved in a detailed business case.
And how long, let's just say we got the money tomorrow for the options analysis, how long would it take for that to be done?
So PwC have estimated it'll be somewhere between 12 and 18 months to run that process. You know, there'll be a community consultation will be a big part of that, and that takes time, as well as the technical analysis that will go into it. So, yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
And just noting the financial constraints of the budget, are we expecting to have buy-in in help to prepare these business cases from other levels of government? So
normally the state, I would expect the state to actually take carriage of the next stage of the business case process. So yes, very much so. We will need them. It's not unusual for councils to do it. I understand that with Gold Coast Light Rail there was some heavy involvement from council on progressing that business case. So it'll just be a case of us working pretty closely with the state, understanding their constraints and their resourcing, and maybe it's something we can take a bit more of a lead in.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Okay, no problem.
Cheers. Any further discussion around this? Councillor Doyle?
Through the chair, I also just would like to thank you for your comprehensive report. It's a lot of work has gone into that, so thank you. I just would like to highlight a problem we have obviously in the wider CBD around traffic congestion. So, and you know, as a result of poor planning and not enough buy-in with regard to funding from the relevant levels of government. So I commend you on this, and it's critical that we do manage this appropriately going forward and be in the driver's seat so that we manage the traffic with our population explosion predicted going forward. Thank you.
Okay.
And just in closing, before we take it to the vote, I think it's important to recognise that in this new council of ours that we're very conscious of the official channels to get projects off the ground like this, and having economic development liaise with the Office of the Mayor so closely in terms of advocacy pieces like this is super important, and it really puts us in good stead not only for good governance but good strategic management of our city moving forward. So to all involved working very hard behind the scenes on this, you know, it makes us super excited, and it gives us a bit of a roadmap to take out to the community for once, because there's often been an ad hoc approach to big infrastructure projects pertaining to our city where, you know, there's often big announcements made, but none of the groundwork has been done in the past to really give us a structured approach to moving forward on these things. So I welcome this new, albeit expensive, approach to preparing business cases to advancing our city. So in that, I'd just like to take it to the vote. All in favour?
Sorry, can we have a discussion once
sorry.
the council officer stood down?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Good. Yeah.
Yes, no, that's fine. Thank you, Mayor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. This is the single biggest infrastructure program that we need. This business case is excellent, and I'll just quote from it on in the opening in the executive summary that Ipswich is experiencing substantial population growth, with Ipswich actually being the fastest LGA in Queensland, and it grew 4.1% from 2018 to 2019. So that's not a forecast; that is actual growth. And in moving forward, Ipswich is the fastest growing local government area. Our projected growth is 4.6%. The rest of Queensland is 1.6%, and Australia is 1%. And in looking through this, I cannot see any other infrastructure project in Australia that is more important than this particular one. This business case shows quite clearly that 70% of the growth, the population growth here in Ipswich, is actually along this corridor. Like this public transport corridor is needed now. We need an interim solution in regards to buses, and I know that the state government put on more buses around Spring Mountain, and it's been a huge success. I'd love to see more of that rolled out while we still plan for this, because it probably will take 10 years before a shovel hits the ground, and we go through that process, because it is a lot of money. We're probably looking at $2 billion worth of infrastructure here in total. And just some of the things that this study shows, and I encourage people, the strategic transport modelling of the future shows without intervention, if nothing happens, the cost of this problem is likely to exceed $1 billion per annum by 2036 if no solution to improve the existing transport is implemented. It also states that the vehicle travel time from Ripley to the CBD is forecast to increase by over 60% by 2026. Now, that's only 6 years away. And a further 50% between 2026 and 2036. And currently, Ipswich is, again, I'll quote from the study here, Ipswich is currently serviced by 2 heavy rail lines and several suburban bus lines. The rail lines are not connected, and only one of the bus services provided in Ipswich is high frequency. The existing public transport provision in the Ipswich LGA is not servicing the region efficiently, with close to 40% of residents dissatisfied with the available public transport services. So I commend this. I think that we're going to have to work really hard with our state and federal colleagues to get the funding for this. But like I said, I can't see that there's another infrastructure project that is more needed in Australia to help families in Ripley, in Ipswich and Springfield, Deebing Heights, Augustine Heights and the rest. So I commend it. Thank you, Chair.
Hear, hear, Mayor. Councillor Madsen?
I'd just add that I think in terms of infrastructure projects, this is the one that will redefine our city moving forward. You've got the historical divide between the new and the old, the east and the west, and it's not just because of common sense things, it's because there's physical infrastructure limitations. It's pretty hard to get from the bottom of Red Bank Plains into the Ipswich CBD, let alone from Springfield to the Ipswich CBD. We need to connect our community, and this is the best project to do that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I think the sooner the better, the quicker that this project, we get the ball rolling on it. We often, in our conversations around the I2S, highlight that, there's no better time than yesterday to get it started, because the behavioural patterns of people who catch public transport versus those who have already purchased their second car, it's really important to really embed public transport behaviours into communities so that we do alleviate some of that road traffic as well. So just acknowledging that it'll be a very exciting day when we are almost shovel ready, so we can tell those people who live in the communities that live by the rail that they don't have to buy their second car, and it means good things for active transport too, people walking places, people catching buses and trains, and there's good environmental outcomes in this as well.
If I may, the Chair, with it, knowing there's a state election coming up, the council has spent about $750,000 of ratepayers' money for this case. I think with this in our back pocket, this council is now armed to go to every single state election candidate and ask them for that $2 million for the options analysis. I think that this city, we're crying out for it, and so it's great to have this, and it's great timing for us to approach all those state election candidates for that funding.
And on that, I will take it to the vote. All those in favour? And the vote is unanimous. Thank you. So we move forward to the IGO Road Safety Action Plan. I'd just like to call Mr. Dilio to the lectern, just for a brief summary as to what the IGO Road Safety Action Plan means for us moving forward. Before Mr. Dilio takes any questions or summarises the IGO Road Safety Action Plan, I'd just like to ask for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Doyle, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Thanks, Mr. Dilio.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. This is a report concerning the development of the Road Safety Action Plan, which is a key deliverable of IGO, the City of Ipswich Transport Plan. The report provided to the General Purposes Committee today is quite detailed and comprehensive. However, in summary, the Road Safety Action Plan aims to provide a plan that Council and its road safety partners will use to reduce road trauma in the Ipswich region in a targeted and collaborative approach. The plan, excuse me, the plan targets a continuous annual reduction of fatal and serious injury crashes. There are 11 specific target areas to address key opportunities for improvement. These targets will be addressed focusing on 5 areas of influence. There are 45 short, medium and long-term actions that have been established for Council and its supporting partners to undertake. The submitted report makes 4 recommendations: that the Road Safety Action Plan and Summary Report be endorsed, that the CEO and Executive Leadership Team communicate and promote the outcomes and key messages, that the Plan and Summary Report be sent to the key state departments for acknowledgement and support, and finally that Council officers be authorised to implement the Road Safety Action Plan.
Thanks, Mr. Dillio. I'd like to open the floor for any questions. Mayor Harding.
Mr. Chair, thank you for this. And I can remember when this first came out in 2016, the road show. Is this the first time that Council have done a coordinated transport plan, or is this something that happens every 10 years, or what's the history?
This is one of the child strategies under the City of Ipswich Transport Plan, which is the fully integrated plan, and that IGO itself is the first time Council has had a fully integrated transport plan. This action plan is one of those child strategies, as I said. Again, road safety has always been front and very important for Council and in everything we do. However, this now formalises our targeted approach to road safety.
Thank you. Thanks,
Councillor.
Could you tell us about the evaluation and review of this program?
Of this program?
What's the plan for that?
So with all of the action plans or strategies from IGO, there will be a 5-year review of all the strategies. So certainly the actions will be, the aim is to implement as actions as we progress, but as things change and I guess reviews are undertaken, there may be a slight tweak or a need to refocus on slightly different actions over time.
I guess a question that I have would be with regards to the timing of this road safety action plan. Did it transpire because of real need in the community for a coordinated approach to road safety? Have there been more or less fatalities in the local government area? What was the key driver behind implementing this road safety action plan?
So progressively since IGO was endorsed by Council in 2016, Council has undertaken a number of, as I said, child strategies, and they've been in a coordinated way. So the first one was the Active Transport Plan, which was endorsed by Council in 2017. Then it was the Public Transport and Advocacy Plan, and this one was the next action plan that was to be delivered under IGO.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Dillio? Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to open the floor up for any discussion around the IGO Road Safety Action Plan. Mayor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. I've been very vocal in the past about some of the actions of the previous council, so I think it's only fair when you see items where the previous council have done an exceptional job, and this is one of those times. I think the IGO transport plan and the child plans was a great initiative of the previous council, and certainly I can see it standing the test of time as well. So I just want to commend the previous council, but also the council officers and the team on working this and providing and continuing on that strategy.
Mm. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, clearly through the Road Safety Action Plan, the other stakeholders, of course, being those that are most integrated with road safety and the reduction of road trauma events in our local government area, that the TMR and Queensland Police Service, QFES and Queensland Health and the Department of Education, as the other stakeholders, working with them in an integrated way like this is clearly the best way forward to gain the results that we desire for the community. So in pulling this together and promoting it through the communicating it to the community and then implementing the plan itself, I think is a great initiative. So I'd like to thank council officers involved in working towards this goal.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Milligan. Yeah, and just to echo that sentiment, I think that this is an important action plan to put forward to our community so that it is something that we do take very seriously. You know, there's only going to be more people driving on the roads through lack of potentially public transport, which was previously discussed. So if we're seen to have a response and to be heavily involved with the stakeholders, you know, within the community, I think that you know, a push for safer drivers can only mean good things for our communities as well. So I guess, is there any further discussion on this matter? I would like to take it to a vote. All those in favour? The vote is unanimous and passed. Moving through, we've got a couple of exciting high-level pieces coming up on the agenda. Firstly, agenda item number 4, the adoption of the Ipswich Nature Centre Master Plan. So I'd just like to invite the relevant council officer to come down and give us a brief overview of this high-level piece.
Good morning, Chair, councillors. Thank you. This presentation is in regards to a high-level master plan for Queen's Park Nature Centre, or Ipswich Nature Centre as it's formally known. So the master plan was undertaken in 2018 and presented to council in early 2019. At the time it was requested that we did some further work in regards to community sentiment and economic benefits of the nature centre. So that piece of work has now been done and has come back extremely positive, with over a vast majority of the respondents being satisfied or very satisfied with the nature centre, and also demonstrating that the nature centre does bring an economic benefit to Queen's Park itself, but also to the CBD. So the master plan is staged over 4 stages. The 4 stages are to allow for that operation to continue of the nature centre, but also to then have new installations provided. It is just at a high level at this point, and there's some high level cost included in the report, and the master plan will then be used to inform some further detailed planning should it be adopted, and council look to do some further improvements within the nature centre itself.
Awesome, thank you, Ms. Canavar. I open the floor for any questions. Councillor Doyle.
Good morning, Kay. This, our nature centre, I'm just interested to know what you see as, I guess, prohibitors and risks if we develop it from the nature centre that it is at the moment. For instance, increasing the types of animals, you know, a proposed koala enclosure, and I guess it goes into that area. What is council's responsibility and an appropriate role moving towards being, for want of a better word, a zoo?
Yep.
Yeah, I'd just be interested to hear your views on that.
Yeah, so the nature centre is obviously within the fabric of Ipswich. It's been there for a very long time, and the Queen's Park itself being a historic park, one of the first parks declared within the state. The nature centre itself, because Queen's Park is historically listed, it has to fit within the current footprint, so we do have to operate within that current footprint of the nature centre, and we have certain I guess guidelines that we need to maintain as far as hard stand and roof space that we provide. The other to go to your question in regards to animal husbandry and animal well-being, so that we are in accordance with legislation, and we do operate under the zoological legislation for how we manage the animals up there. So the master plan has taken all that into consideration to have a look at what are those iconic species, what's the purpose and intent of the nature centre as far as providing that education around what Ipswich has to offer as far as native wildlife and fauna, and then providing a I guess, a design that facilitates that visitation. We would also do need to manage the visitation that's in there so that we can still provide that, I guess, level of service that we're wanting to provide without, increasing it to the point that we can't manage it as well.
Thank you.
Through the chair. Ms. Cameron, thank you very much. It's a quite inspiring master plan. Was there any consideration, I guess, how many councils have zoos in Queensland?
In Queensland, I'm aware Rockhampton has one as well. I'm not sure of the total number. There wouldn't be very many that are council operated and owned. That is something, and I guess going back to Councillor Doyle's question as well, is something to take into consideration. It would, I guess that's something as far as where does that sit as far as providing that to our community as a service, and at the moment it is a free service too. And there are, in the master plan, it does also look at opportunities for those value add and other user pay type experiences. But I guess going to your question, there's not many zoos that are council owned and operated, so it's quite unique. It provides that visitor and tourism experience as well, and it is noted that it is one of Ipswich's #1 tourist attractions through TripAdvisor, so it does get a high number of visitors each year.
I guess the other thing to consider, we're looking at a total investment over 5 stages of potentially $10 million. Was there any consideration of moving it elsewhere for growth later, or what was the consideration?
That consideration wasn't actually taken as part of the scoping of this particular master plan. It was the consultants were engaged just to look within that current footprint. But moving forward, if that was something that we wanted to have a bit of a look at, I imagine to start from scratch it would be quite significantly higher than the proposal to just increase the number of exhibits.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Canavar. I'd now like to open the floor up for any discussion on this. Can I get a mover for this item? I beg your pardon. Councillor Doyle, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Madsen. I'd now like to open up for any discussion on the matter. Thank you, Councillor Madsen.
I just add, as somebody who's taken my young fella there pretty regularly, it's a really positive place to go in Ipswich. You just see happy kids, happy parents, happy grandparents. It's a really great facility, and council should be really proud that we offer this to our residents, and we should maintain that service level moving forward.
Any other discussion on Mayor Harding?
Thank you, Chair. I just note in the documentations we have in attachment 3 on page 459 the amount of visitors this actually does attract to Ipswich, but also how much the residents of Ipswich enjoy this. Around 45% of the visitors, which I think about over nearly 64,000 people last year, were actually from outside Ipswich, and 55%, which was about 77,000 people, were from Ipswich itself. And looking at the visitor expenditure, it says a program of visitor surveys conducted estimate that total visitor expenditure was close to $800,000, with expenditure from visitors outside the Ipswich area as well. So it's I think it's quite interesting. I think that's, I realise this is a high-level master plan and there's an implementation, a management plan and an implementation plan, but I think this is something that would be for us to look at, certainly.
Yeah.
Through the chair, sorry, I just would like to make the comment that because it is such a successful, day trip, I guess, for visitors to Ipswich, and at a time when we, are trying to attract more and more people, it would be very easy to lose sight of what it originally was, which is a free place for families to go. And I don't think we should, the balance will be moving forward, not lose sight of it being a lovely place to visit versus trying to grow and expand it, potentially to attract more visitors and try and reap some economic benefits from that. But we do need to be considered and measured and not lose sight of what it's about.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that it's the exciting part, you know, if we choose to adopt this as a council, it gives us lots of room to move within that and discuss the scope and the direction of the facility moving forward. It's been alluded to on the floor this morning, but not expressly, that it can be quite a costly venture to operate your own zoo or nature facility, and it is a level of service that, you know, our constituents have come to understand. So I guess that in the adoption of the master plan, if we choose to proceed, that it'll be a very interesting, some very interesting conversations that we get to have around the strategic direction of the Ipswich Nature Centre. But I guess that community sentiment will always be upheld by us, and we'll always make sure that we get to share those special memories. And Jacob speaks of taking his son there. I have memories of myself being taken there by my family on many weekends when there wasn't all that much to do. So yeah, I would like to say that I fully endorse the master plan for the Nature Centre, and look forward to how we get to move forward in terms of how we organise the operational plan moving forward with this as well. Any further discussion? I'd like to take it to a vote. All those in favour? The vote is unanimous. Thank you. We're going to invite Ms Canavar back up to the lectern to discuss another high-level piece, the master plan for White Rock Spring Mountain Conservation Estate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fechner. So this report is in regards to the White Rock Spring Mountain Conservation Estate master plan that was done recently. White Rock is obviously one of our very premier, well-visited, well-loved conservation estates within the city. Its visitation has increased quite substantially over the last number of years, going from around 30,000 to over 74,000 recently. It is a very ecologically and culturally sensitive estate. So the master plan was developed to look at that future direction we would like to go as far as managing the estate, to continue to enhance and look after the cultural and ecological values, but also to provide visitor experiences within the nature-based recreation opportunities. So the master plan is designed over 4 stages, over 20 years. Primarily that is so that we can have a look at essentially consolidating on the existing infrastructure that's there within the northern part of the estate around Paperbark Flats day use area, and then having a look at the future stages with doing some of those further surveys around cultural significance and ecological significance before we design or facilitate the implementation of additional infrastructure within the estate. The master plan goes into providing some also themed trails. So it's picking up on the historical history of the area, which was used in war as a site for training. It also has Indigenous cultural significance and logging history as well. So there's some themed trails there. The plan also looks at types of infrastructure to, I guess, tread lightly within the estate, so some boardwalks and viewing platforms around White Rock itself to provide the opportunity to view the rock without actually accessing the rock itself. So the master plan is presented as that forward planning document. At this point, it is would need to look at the implementation and budget around that.
Thank you, Ms Kavanagh. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah. No.
I'll just wait till general discussions, okay?
No worries. Any specific questions?
To the Chair, it may relate to what Councillor Owen was going to ask about amenities. I was going to ask something. I don't want to take. I just noticed that it does talk about stage 1 about amenities in there. I don't know if Councillor Owen.
My concern is that we do have the long drop at Paperbark Flats, but there's no water. So during this time of COVID, I'm just wondering if it's possible to put a water tank there or something, so that and soap, so that people can. I know that it's very well visited with runners and everything else, but I'm just looking at the implications that we're encouraging people to come and we're not providing the safety measure?
So there is provisions of toilets, as you mentioned, and water available for washing hands, but not potable water. That would be something we could manage in light of similar types of estates where they are essentially off-grid, so it's providing that water through the collection of rainwater or delivery of water into the estate. So that is something we could have a look at a bit more further.
I guess what I think that the plan is wonderful. I've long been in favour of it because I know there's erosion on some of the tracks, and I think that what you'll do is wonderful. But I'm just looking forward. The development at the end of Redbank Plains is now complete, and in future years, I know that this is about your master plan, but in future years I'd really like to see sewerage and water brought up to paperbark flats, if we can consider that in a future plan.
We can take that on note as far as we do the implementation to look at those. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Canova. Before we move into discussion, I'd just like a mover on the item. Thank you, Councillor Ireland, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Johnnick. So now open the floor for any discussion around this.
Through the chair.
Councillor Ireland.
Councillor Ireland. I beg your pardon, Vicky, sorry. Councillor Doyle?
Through the chair, I'd just like to make a comment about the master plan. It's a fantastic report and a great strategic plan that I think balances well, attracting and growing the visitor numbers to White Rock, all the while preserving and respecting our Indigenous culture and the White Rock itself. So I think it is speaking to each of those issues and really working towards getting that balance right.
Thanks, Councillor Doyle. Yeah,
Through the chair.
Councillor Ireland.
I understand that this is an environmental project to preserve what we've got, but during the school holidays, Facebook's been full of people that have been doing the Brisbane Valley Trail Run. So I think that if, as soon as we can get some of this pathway open, I think it's a great attractor, but even for our own residents to get out and do the longer walks with their children and enjoy what we've got to offer.
Yeah, I agree. Councillor Johnnick?
Yeah, I just wanted to commend the master plan. I think it's fantastic to really encourage community health and fitness and connection, especially how the trails link around the Spring Mountain development area, and you can access White Rock paths all the way around Springfield Central. I think it's phenomenal. It's very exciting for our community.
Yeah, I agree. I guess that I just, in terms of discussion around it, I think that they're just piggybacking on what Councillor Doyle was saying earlier. There is a lot of opportunity to integrate, the operation or the implementation of the master plan of White Rock into how we successfully implement the Indigenous Accord as well. And I think that preserving the cultural heritage of White Rock and it's been an area that's gained popularity, so there is a need for us to take a serious look at how we're interacting with the space, how sensitive the space is to people in our community. And I think that there is a real opportunity, and if we have the opportunity to work on this, that there are some key linkages that we can have between this and achieving some of the objectives of the Indigenous Accord as well. I just wanted to make note of that.
Through the chair. I just would like to note that education is a big theme within the master plan, and it is so important. I mean, knowledge is power. So we talk about the theme trail, so educating our younger people on the significance along the trails, but then the other side of it is, I guess, educating around the Indigenous culture and trying to discourage people from scaling the actual rock itself.
Mayor Harding?
Thank you, Chair. Ipswich is quite unique, the fact that all of our conservation areas we manage ourselves. We don't have any national parks, which are normally looked after and funded by the state government. The ratepayers of Ipswich take on that burden, but it also means that we get to be masters of our own destiny, and I think this master plan shows that we are being the masters of our destiny and shaping this conservation area to be sensitive, but also opening it up in an ecological way to residents and people outside Ipswich. I note Council Island's concern with toilets and water, and said that in stage 1 there is that upgrade to the toilet blocks. I think it will be good for part of that stage 1 planning for council to come back to us on the feasibility of having at least tank water or some other way to have some water there. And I also commend the theme trails that are coming through. Certainly the military history trail I will be personally very interested in, knowing my family background, but also the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage and Landscape Values Trail, the Natural Environment and Geological History Trail, the Long Walk and Ride Trail, the bouldering sites, as well as, I know it's very popular, the mountain biking trails, which will be investigated for experienced and beginner riders. I think it's really, really exciting.
Thank you, Mayor. No further discussion. I'd like to take it to a vote. All those in favour? The vote is unanimous. Thank you.
Mr Chair, before we move on, could I please ask members of the committee to speak up a bit louder? I feel I'm out in the outer reaches of the solar system here on my little desk. Everyone's facing.
Noted, Councillor Milligan. Thank you.
And if council will put their microphones closer.
But Mayor Harding, of course, does have a very clear voice, so if we could all follow her emulation, that would be great.
Well, they say lead by example, don't they, Mayor?
That's that good army training.
Yes. Moving right along to agenda item number 6, Landholder Partnerships Program, review of the recommendation there. So I guess we'll just have a quick little brief from Ms Canavar once more, down to the lectern. Thank you so much. Before we
Thank you.
need to speak to the matter, I might ask for a mover on the item. Thank you, Councillor Ireland. And a seconder, Councillor Kunzelman. Thank you, Ms Canavar.
Thank you. Landholder Partnerships is one of Council's key tools of working with landholders in the protection and management of conservation values across the city. The Landholder Partnership Program has been operating for more than 20 years, funded through our EnviroPlan levy. Last year we took the opportunity to review the partnership program as it's been going for that over 20 years, and to have a look at ways in which we could improve that by gaining the insight from the landholders themselves. So what did they value about the program? What were they looking for that would support them in managing conservation values on their properties? And what kind of incentives were they looking for that would help them to deliver on those outcomes? So Council engaged a consultant to assist in the facilitation of those working groups, workshops with those landholders, and to pull together a recommendation report for the changes to the program. So out of those recommendations was to take the existing 9 partnership programs that we had on offer and refine that to 6 partnership programs. In that, one of those programs was to move to a more statutory partnership, which is a covenant agreement that would be on title. That particular program would be dedicated to landholders that were looking to secure those conservation values in perpetuity, and through that they would be offered a land management payment to support them with the outcomes of that. The conservation agreements do offer also landholders a grant on an annual basis, which they would apply for to support them with on-ground works, and land management payments, as I've mentioned, for those higher level agreements. The proposal was also to support the Landfill Wildlife Partners, of which we have about 195 partners, who previously weren't eligible for a grant. So the recommendation is to continue to support them, because a lot of those landholders would then like to progress into the higher level agreements. So it was a really good incentive to support them in achieving that outcome. In addition to that, we would continue with the Habitat Gardens program, which is focused on urban properties that are looking to do, whilst they don't have large conservation values on their land, are still interested in doing sustainability and conservation outcomes. So the recommendation is around transitioning that program from the current 9 partnerships on offer to the 6 partnerships, and that would be done essentially over a 2-year process to allow property owners to transition into those new programs.
Thank you, Ms Kavanagh. Any questions?
Just have a, through the chair. With the habitat gardens, they used to get plants. Is that what used to happen? They used to get extra plants and they had to have a certain amount of land?
So for habitat gardens, no, they're just urban blocks, so they don't have to have a certain size of land, and they are eligible for additional plants through the
is that
nursery.
one still operating currently? Just had a
Yes.
resident that said it had been put on hold. I'm not sure. It might have been a different plan.
It may have. I don't believe it's been put on hold, as far as I'm aware. The program is still continued. It's an online registration, so it
Yeah.
should still continue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can check that though, just to make sure. But yeah.
All right, thank you.
Have you liaised with any of the current landholders in the voluntary conservation agreement, and what are their thoughts about transitioning into a more formalised?
Yeah, so we engage with the landholders through a series of workshops and surveys, and those comments were taken on board. They were really keen to look at the new programs, especially around those incentives to increase those slightly to give them better opportunities for delivering on-ground outcomes.
Is it going to be easy for them to transition into one of the new programs?
For the vast majority it will be, yeah, because they're non-binding agreements on properties, so they can look at the new program and just transition through to those. The main ones would be around those covenants, which are more of a statutory program. So the proposal is there would be limited number of people that would be looking to do that. They're a very high-level program and would be probably only working on about 2 in the first year to transition into that one.
Mayor Harding, sorry.
Ms Kavanagh, thank you for this report. Are you asking for us to authorise the spending of money as per page 125? Is that what this is? Or are you just informing us of that spend?
The current budget for the 2021 has been approved, and the report is really identifying that transition and the additional costs with the covenants.
just a noting.
Yep.
Through the chair. With the money that's being spent, what are the guidelines around it? Does council actually go and approve where the money's being spent? Do you give the landowner the money, or how does it work?
So we have 2 officers that support landholders in the development of their property management plans, and part of this review was to look at streamlining and putting better governance around that. So the landholders would develop a property management plan which would clearly outline what they are planning to do on their property, how they would achieve that, and then they would apply for a grant similar to our community grants process. So it's a proper process with criteria, and then the application of that would be assessed, and funding is provided to the landholder.
Is the full amount, like $8,000, is the full amount given to them when the grant's approved, or and what happens if they don't spend it all?
It's up to $8,000, so they may only apply for $500, or they might apply for the full $8,000 depending on the works, and they do have to acquit those funds. So they do have to demonstrate that they've achieved the outcomes and provide proof of receipt if they've engaged contractors or the like to deliver that. So there is a full acquittal process as well.
Okay, thank you.
As part of being... so I'll probably not ask a question for Kavanagh.
Okay.
I'll withdraw.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Kavanagh. Let's open the floor for any discussion. Mayor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. Noting that this council wishes to be transparent and accountable, I would certainly like to move an amendment for B, purely just to highlight the money that is being already budgeted and spent by the council for the voluntary conservation agreement. It is a total of an extra $100,000 as to what was happening before. I just want to be upfront that is what is being spent, and that is, and I understand that's sort of been signed off internally within council to be spent, but I just want it to be really obvious to the people of Ipswich that that's what's happening.
That's fair.
That's okay.
Exactly.
So I guess the council resolved to work in partnership with landholders that have a voluntary conservation agreement
In place?
at a cost of it looks to have to be $100,000, $60,000 plus $40,000. Please feel free to correct me, CEO.
Is that correct?
That's,
Is that the difference between the difference in the budget between the 2021 and the 21-22?
yes, that's the ones that's asterisked on page 125. the 60,000 for the land management payment for new VCC properties and transition payments, and then 40,000 for the voluntary conservation covenant establishment and associated property and legal fees.
Some of that is a reallocation of existing funds, and then an expectation there will be additional costs through the transition whilst we move from some partnerships through to the others. So the expectation will be that that may drop down again the following.
Through the Chair, CEO, is that amendment accurate, or that's my understanding that we're just being open and upfront with how we're reallocating funding?
Well,
Have I misinterpreted it?
Should say, or it's under the new model, would that be correct? Under transition under the new model? Noting that that new model is in the following year's budget, not this current year's budget.
Correct, yeah. I'm just wanting the cost of things to be up front and centre rather than in a way in a report.
Under the new model of landholder, so get rid of the two of the new. No. Yeah. Keep on going. Yeah, perfect. Landholder, yeah. Landholder. I think that's right. Is that okay?
Mr Chair, through you, CEO, should we have at a cost of $100,000 at the end of the statement? That would read that with landholders that have a voluntary conservation agreement at a cost of $100,000. That part should be at the end of the sentence.
I'm happy to move that to the
Yeah,
end
what
of
are
the
your
sentence.
thoughts? Yeah.
I'm happy to move that. Thank you, Ms. Roberts.
Perhaps it should say
In 2021,
$100,000 over the existing arrangement. So that's what it really is. It's not $100,000. It's $100,000 more. Should that be right?
An additional.
Over the existing.
So I guess we've.
Okay. So, Councillor Ireland, Councillor Kunzelman, you in agreement with
Yes, I agree.
this?
You want to put an additional in? I would think so.
If we put it at landholder conservation
Says-
at an additional cost
Okay, yeah.
in 2021, 2022. It's actually 21 to 22.
I agree to that.
Is that okay?
It's fine. Thank you.
Agreement.
Thank you. Thank you,
you.
Chair.
Any further discussion around the item? Now take it to a vote. All those in favour? Votes unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item number 7, review of the Local Disaster Management Plan 2020. Can I get a mover on that, please? Mayor Harding, Councillor Kunzelman. And seconded. Thanks. It's Mayor Harding and seconded by Councillor Kunzelman. Is there general consensus? Would you like to have the officer come up and report on the updates to the management plan?
Chair, as the chair of the Local Disaster Management Group, there's been extensive consultation with the council officers on this, so I don't have a requirement to ask council officers anything to do with this policy. We've been briefed on it.
Yep.
I'll hand over to the seconder.
As Deputy Chair, I don't need further explanation either.
Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Mayor Harding. So I guess we'll move to any discussion on the item. Just note that I guess that this is a legislated annual review and that the Chair and Deputy Chair of Disaster Management Committee has been heavily involved in this. So on noting that, I'd like to take it to a vote. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Passed. Thank you. Moving on to item number 8, proposed new sublease over freehold land for community purposes to Wirecare, South East Queensland Incorporated, trading as Ymca Social Impact. 7003 Parkland Drive, Springfield Central. On this, I'd like to invite the relevant council officer up to speak to it.
It's coming.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. And while we're waiting for the council officer, I'd just like a mover for the item. Thank you, Councillor Jonik. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Tully.
Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. This is a report on a sublease to the Ymca after we held an expression of interest process to select a candidate to occupy lease area C. It's at the Springfield Hall, which is located next to the Springfield Secondary School. The agreement with the Ymca is for a 3-year term for $1. They're a community organisation. They will occupy the lower level of Area C only. The upper level still hasn't been developed. And just to give you a bit of a background on the history of our agreement there, we have an agreement with the Department of Education to sublease Area C from them. We actually own the land there and we gave them a land lease. They've built a structure there which we've contributed to with capital funds there to build that structure, and then they give us a sublease back. So I recommend that council enter into the sublease with and management agreement with the Ymca.
Thank you, Mr. Brett McGrath. Is there any questions for...
Can I just clarify through the chair that the area above is actually airspace that the Education Department needed for their Great Hall? Is that right?
They did inquire about it at the time, so it's just undeveloped at the moment. It's just a shell there.
That was what the original
No, it was...
application was for?
No, it was... Area C above there is a sublease back to us for us to use down the track. But we haven't had the funds to be able to develop that yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Mr. Brewer, how much did the Ipswich City Council contribute to this particular facility?
So we've given the land as a land lease, and also I think it's around $2 million that we contributed to the construction.
The ratepayers of Ipswich contributed $2 million towards this facility?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. McGrath.
Thank you.
I'd like to open the floor up for any discussion on the matter. Councillor Tully.
I'm supportive of this. I think it finalises, one outstanding matter for that general precinct, and I think it's good for the area. And we're talking about a population ultimately of 86,000 in that Greater Springfield area, and I'll tend to say more at next week's council meeting.
Thank you.
Through the chair, not exactly on this one. I think it's great when council can put in community centres, but I hope that we'll also look for a community centre out for Ripley as well.
Thank you. Always looking out for the constituents of your division. Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Mayor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. I know that the community have been greatly waiting to see who would receive this tender. I know it's been an open tender out to the marketplace, and I know that when I had when I became the mayor, I had an initial discussion with the member for Jordan, Sherry Smullen, and it was one of the items that she raised with me as to who will be managing this, because she knows that the community are waiting for this. So I think this will be of great relief to the residents in Springfield to have this open and working. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'd like to take it to the vote. All those in favour? The vote's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item number 9, the proposed trustee lease over trust land for recreation purposes, Queensland Rugby Football League Limited, 43 The Terrace, North Ipswich. I'll invite Mr. Brett McGrath down to the lectern. Can I please have a mover for the item? Harding, seconded by Councillor Kunzelman.
Good morning again. This is a report to enter into a trustee lease with the Queensland Rugby League. Currently council is the trustee of this land. We have an agreement with Rugby League Ipswich until 2033, so this will effectively terminate that agreement. The lease with the QRL will be over lease A and B, which is the administration centre, and also the can bar. So that will give them full control of those facilities. At the moment, the QRL is the managing body of Rugby League in Queensland, and Rugby League Ipswich are the local branch that operates the local junior and senior competitions. The QRL have a lot of operational staff located out here that provide rugby league development in the Ipswich region. The Rugby League Ipswich themselves basically just manage the competitions and make decisions about senior and junior rugby league, so it made sense for us to enter into the agreement with Queensland Rugby League and not Rugby League Ipswich. The new trustee lease will be for 20 years. There's a rent-free period for the first 3 years, and the rent will commence at 3% of the land value, which is in line with our policy to enter into tenure over council land. So that effectively makes the commencing rent after the 3-year rent-free period at $7,950 plus GST. Also with that, council will be undertaking the major maintenance of the facility there, and the QRL will be responsible for the minor maintenance, and they'll be responsible for the utilities as well. So I recommend that we enter into the lease with the Queensland Rugby League for the 20-year term.
Thank you. Open the floor for any questions. Mayor Harding.
Just to clarify, Mr. Kura, that Queensland Rugby League will be paying this lease, not Rugby League Ipswich, is that
That's correct.
correct? What were the views of Rugby League Ipswich with this? Was this contentious or fine? Yeah,
it was a little bit when we first negotiated with them. They wanted to continue with the same terms of their existing agreement, which meant we paid a budget deficit each year. So they're not favourable terms for council or community and not in line with their policy. So we had to negotiate with both Rugby League Ipswich, and they have come round to accepting this now and are happy to operate under the QRL.
I guess I commend the fact that it's a 20-year lease, which is, I think, great continuity for the community. I guess looking at the fact that we're, Western Corridor bit out here is fighting really hard for an NRL licence, but also Western Pride's fighting for A-League licence. What would happen if one of those or both of those happen? How would that impact this lease?
Yeah, so there is a clause within the lease that if there is any sort of redevelopment of the facility at North Ipswich, then we would have to relocate the QRL in another location for similar terms of what the current lease, so for whatever the remaining term is, yeah.
Would that be a cost to the council?
It would, if we had a facility available that was suitable, then it would just be putting them into that facility. But if we don't, then we might have to find something.
The onus will be on council?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Through the chair, Mr. McGrath, the arrangement, the lease arrangement with QRL and Ipswich City Council, is that on behalf of Rugby League Ipswich? Is that consistent with other areas within Queensland? That structure, I guess, we're moving away from a direct leasing arrangement with Rugby League Ipswich. I'm just trying to get a sense for whether or not it's consistent to terms within other...
Yeah, from what we understand, and that's what the QRL has told us, is that's how they're moving to that sort of model where they move into each region because they put the staff there and then do a lot of the rugby league development in that region, where the local branch like Rugby League Ipswich just control the competition.
Okay, so would it be correct to say that I guess it's a move by QRL to try and put some formality and structure in place to give long-term support to local clubs to allow them to focus on what they're good at, which is the coaching, and then is that...
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's exactly, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now I'd like to open the floor up for... Did I move and second this?
You're going to move in a second.
Thank you so much. I guess I open the floor up for any discussion on the item.
Ipswich has a strong history of rugby league, and I come from a strong rugby league family. My father, I grew up with my father playing in the Group 18 down on the Tweed, and he's still on the board of the Moorlambar Mustangs. I think it's great that this council's continuing to support rugby league, and I think it's great that we've moved towards this agreement with with Queensland Rugby League to be consistent with other jurisdictions as well, and I think it gives financial confidence of rugby league here. And I also note that whilst the season here with Rugby League Ipswich isn't formally starting, that 3 teams are actually starting a season in the first weekend of August, and I think we're looking forward to seeing those 3 teams playing. Thank you.
Through the Chair, I concur with the Mayor's comments. You know, the operational obligations are sometimes very onerous on these smaller community or regional clubs. So I think it's a great outcome that allows RLI to focus on the community and sport and coaching and let the business end be taken care of by Queensland Rugby League, who have the resources to manage this type.
Yeah, I agree, and it's consistent with Council's view that there's a push and a focus on good governance structures as well. So if our organisations out there who ultimately feed back into our organisation are well-oiled machines, then it makes it easy to help these community organisations moving forward too. So I definitely agree that a move to good governance in this particular arrangement is a really positive one for us. Noting that there's no more discussion, I'd like to take it to the vote. All those in favour, and that's unanimous. Thank you.
Through the chair, I'd like to move for an adjournment.
How long would you like, Councillor? 10 minutes? Awesome. Do we need to take that to a vote?
Yeah.
CEO?
It's a procedural motion.
Okay. All those in favour?
Is there a second?
You don't need to second a procedural motion.
No, it's procedural. Yeah.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
How long?
10 minutes. Recording working okay over there? Yep. Awesome, thank you very much. Okay, so moving right along to item number 10, the community donations report. And again, I'll ask for a mover on this one. Thank you, Councillor Doyle, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Jonik. I guess I just seek the support of my fellow councillors to move this through as evidenced in the report. We might not invite the council officer to come down to speak to this, rather just open it up for any discussion. As the monthly report for the donations come through, they're all listed there in the report. Is there any discussion that anyone wishes to offer up on this? Great. We'll go straight to the vote. All those in favour of accepting the report? And we have a unanimous decision. Thank you. So we'll move swiftly on to item number 11, the amendment to delegation to the CEO. Who will specifically be speaking to this? Thank you, Mr. Dunleavy. If you come please. I'll just to clarify, CEO, do I need a mover at this point?
No, not until the staff is finished.
Thank you, Mr. Dunleavy.
Thank you. This report is just the regular update from LGAQ in relation to amendment to some of the powers and which would amend the delegation instrument from council to the CEO. As I've mentioned in the report, the amendments are relatively minor in nature. There's one or two operational amendments, but they're fairly insignificant and mainly relate to operational matters. I've also had a review of the whole of the LGAQ report, and some of the matters that they delegated as powers are actually obligations from council officers, so we sifted through those and put the most relevant ones as an amendment to the instrument.
Are there any questions from the floor to Mr. Dunleavy? Mayor Harding.
Through the chair, I noticed, thank you, Mr. Dunleavy, you said they're relatively minor. Are there any significant changes to the delegations? Because we've got obviously probably about a couple of hundred pages
No.
of them.
No, there's no significant changes to any of the instruments. They're mainly, or any of the acts. Most of them are to either amend certain sections of the acts. There's one or two powers which have been delegated, one particular one under the state penalties regulation, which relates really, I don't know in an operational sense when council may or may not use it, but it gives the power, if council wish to delegate it down to the CEO, to be an approved work sponsor for people who are suffering hardship in paying payments back to the state penalties. And that's probably the only major change in the process.
From a risk perception, is there anything here that will increase council's risk?
No.
Financially, okay. May I just ask about one of which is, I think, on page 360, which is on section 51, powers as a generator of waste relating to the notification and reporting of changes in test results. Just noting some of the sensitivities here in Ipswich with waste operators. Does that particular subsection, how does that change? How does this amendment?
Well, Mayor, it's really operational in nature because it's essentially just putting a reporting requirement on council if they find out that something is not general waste and it becomes regulated waste. Within 24 hours, we've got to make the report, which would ordinarily under matters would be an operational requirement anyway. And there's a penalty provision if we fail to do that. So it would be an obligation that they would, I would think, be doing already, okay. But this clarifies it by putting it in the instrument.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dunleavy.
Thank you.
Before we move into discussion, I'll just get a mover for the item. Thank you, Councillor Doyle, and a seconder. Thank you, Mayor Harding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunleavy. Is there any discussion from the floor with regards to any of these delegations?
Through the chair, could I just confirm, CEO, if there was any increase in the risk profile or any financial implications of the delegation changes?
No, fundamentally, these are just to do with minor changes in legislation. So if there are changes in the delegations through to in the legislative powers to the council, then the delegations need to be adjusted where it's appropriate. So this, I think Mr Dunleavy identified as well the LGAQ list, which provides you a list. He's cross-checked and identified a couple of other issues, so no significant changes at all. And unfortunately, these will continue to come through as legislation changes.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No further discussion. I'll take this one to the vote. All those in favour? The vote's unanimous and passed. Thank you. Moving along to the contract for Urban Heat Island study with Griffith University. I just would like to note that instead of a tender consideration plan being prepared, this is another option that we have as a council when there's only one suitable applicant to perform a certain action for council. Is there any councillor out in the room that would like me to invite the council officer down to speak to the specific study from Griffith University about urban heat islands, or are we happy to take what was in the pack as read and noted? Read and noted? Awesome, thank you. So I'll just get a mover on the item. Thank you, Councillor Doyle, and a seconder, Councillor Kunzelman. Is there any further discussion? Which there doesn't appear to be any. I'd like to take this one to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Moving through to item 13, COVID-19 stimulus grants project status. Again, I seek the advice of my fellow councillors as to whether we need the relevant council officer to come up and speak to this. This is all the hard work that they've been doing behind the scenes to make sure that we're prepared to assist our community in COVID-19 recovery, or to make sure that we're well prepared from an economic perspective, so that we're pulling our weight as the local government representatives here. So I guess I'll ask for a mover on this item. Thank you, Councillor Doyle, and a seconder. Thank you, Mayor Harding. I open the floor up to any discussion on the matter. Mayor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, our community is hurting and recovering, working through COVID, and I'd like to note that the federal government has provided, $2.3 million to assist, but also the state government has provided nearly $6.5 million, and the report tables that work is not only vital work in our capital works program, but also it means local jobs. There's been a strong push by both the federal and state government that these grants are spent with supplies locally, and I just want to thank the state and federal governments for those grants.
Yep. Here. Any further discussion out there on this one? Noting that, I'll take this one to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Moving on. So in a similar vein to item 12, I guess, we move to item 14, the Demographic Information System and Living in Ipswich Livability Survey. I'll ask the room, I'll ask my fellow councillors and mayor if we're required to bring the council officer up if you have any questions for them. Noting that, I'll ask for a mover on the item. Thank you, Councillor Doyle, and a seconder. Thank you, Mayor Harding. So just a bit of running commentary on this one. Again, we've identified this particular group to perform the livability survey for us. From what I understand from the briefing that we had, this particular operator collects a lot of data within our local government area and in doing so, adding the livability study to it means that they get access to the other data that they already collect within the local government area around it. So I think that this is a low risk decision for us, and it's a great study. If you have time to read if the members of the public have time to read the report, it'll be a positive outcome for us, because it gives us a score and it gives us lots to celebrate about living in this wonderful city. So if there is no further discussion, Mayor Harding, rather.
Thank you, Chair. And I note that this is asking basically for a sole source, going straight to this company for a 4-year contract for $216,000. I do note that they are from Victoria, and we do have our buy Ipswich policy. So I know in briefings beforehand we spoke with council officers. They look to be the only company in Australia that does this kind of service and is used for I think most councils area. So we're very much cognizant of trying to make sure that we purchase everything from Ipswich, but this is probably one of those cases where this service isn't available here or even in Queensland.
Yeah, I agree, and the application of having other data in their data set that could assist them, it means that they are probably the superior choice in doing so. But yes, thanks for pushing the buy Ipswich approach. It is something that's very important to this council. Noting that there's no further discussion, I'd like to take this to a vote. All those in favour? As I look around the room, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving straight through to another report for noting, item number 15, Ipswich Waste Services January to March 2020 quarterly report. We're in consensus that we don't need the officer to speak to this report. You would like to see the... Yes,
please, Chair.
So I'd like to invite Ms. Kavanagh down to the lectern to speak to this. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
Through the Chair, thank you for indulging me. Just one of the reports on page 635, I note that the level of absenteeism is significantly lower than previous quarters, with a decrease from 9.69% at the start of the financial year to 4.05% in the January-March quarter. Do you know what that's attributed to, and how we can continue that as an employer of choice?
It was a really good result. Actually, we were great to see that. We did have some changes. Been working really strongly with the team as far as looking at the cultural and workplace requirements and building relationships with the drivers and the union representatives there.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was a really positive outcome. Hoping that continues through the next quarter. COVID has given us some challenges, but we're putting a few programs in place to support them.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kavanagh. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions? Councillor Doyle?
Ms. Kavanagh, I was looking at the bin app data within the report with interest. I guess I know within Division 3, Councillor Fechner and I, and it possibly would be the same within others, we still get a lot of enquiries or complaints from residents usually around missed bin service. Just wondering, are you satisfied with the education program for residents around the bin app, the options available to them as far as progressing, a missed bin service, for instance, would be progressed far more quickly and rectified quickly as opposed to coming... Yeah.
So we haven't done recent any strong campaigns around the bin app, and we are looking at better communications, particularly around the waste transfer, what you can and can't take to there, fees and charges, and just generally providing better information to our residents. So that we will take that on board and look at more campaigns around the bin app itself. Yep. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So I would like to ask for a mover on this one. Mayor Harding and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Seconding that. Open the floor for any discussion. Mayor Harding.
Through the Chair, just in regards to the Deputy Mayor's comments, I think over the last 5 years I've only had my bin missed once. That was last year, and I got home about 7 o'clock one night, and so I stood on the curbside and logged on the council website. There's a missed bin service function there. And before I left for work the next day, my bin was already emptied. So I was really impressed. I guess I encourage residents to call the 3810 6666 number or log online if they have a missed bin service.
Yeah, I agree. And meeting the KPIs in the quarter, just an absolute champion effort. But also, there's generally a 24-hour turnaround on something like that. So it's a good service that Ipswich City Waste Services provides for everyone.
Through the Chair, I'd just like to clarify my comments or questions for Ms Kavanagh earlier. It was certainly no suggestion of poor service delivery. I absolutely recognise it's a very large, complex service that they're delivering, and inevitably there will be one or two bins missed along the way. And yes, we have seen by the time we follow up if the bin, missed bin's been actioned, it's already well and truly done. So yeah, very, very responsive.
I agree.
Yeah.
Without any further discussion, I'd like to take it to the vote. All those in favour? The vote is unanimous. Thank you. So moving right along to item number 16, community donation requests received in June. Is there any councillor out on the floor that would like to bring the relevant councillor officer up for questioning? That being noted, we'll ask for a mover on the item. Thank you, Councillor Doyle, and a seconder, please. Thank you, Mayor Harding. I open the floor up for any discussion on this particular item, which there's none, so we'll take it straight to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, the vote's unanimous. Passed. Moving right along to item number 17 now, Urban Development Institute of Australia proposed memorandum, the understanding with Ipswich City Council, and I will invite the relevant council officer up to speak to this one. Thank you, Mr. Tabulo.
Chair, Mayor, Councillors, good morning. Peter Tabulo, General Manager of Planning and Regulatory Services. The Urban Development Institute of Australia is the peak body representing developers and the industry across the nation. There is a Queensland division. The Queensland division reached out to us recently at a number of levels, and one of them was to present to Council the opportunity to enter into a memorandum of understanding with respect to setting up a working group between Council and the UDIA, at which it will foster just open communication and discussion on a range of policy matters and the like with respect to the development industry. And I put the recommendation to Council for endorsement of that. My experience in the past with these memorandums of understanding and the working groups, that they do just help to facilitate conversation around policy matters within the community. The recommendation is there for councils to nominate 3 representatives from council. I did take the privilege, so to speak, and in the documentation I did suggest that the mayor would form one of those members in the documentation, but it's up to the council to decide which 3 councillors you see fit to be on the group.
Thank you, Mr. Tabulo. So I'll ask for a mover on this.
To move it, you need to tell us who the 3 are.
To move? Okay, so I propose that, an amendment actually, that we nominate 4 councillors to be members of the Ipswich City Council UDIA branch joint working group, and that those members be as follows: Mayor Harding, Councillor Kunzelman, Councillor Ireland, and Councillor Tully.
You just need a seconder.
Can I get a seconder? Thank you, Mayor Harding. Thank you very much. Myself, yeah. Thanks, Vicky.
And a second. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Is there any further discussion with regards to this?
I'd just like to say that I think it's very important with the growth that we're having out through White Rock and all of Ripley South, Ripley North, right out to the country now. I think it's very important that we work with all of the developers to get a united outcome for some of the smaller developments that are happening. So I think it's an important role.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Chair, concurring with Councillor Ireland, it's a massive, one of the biggest deliverables this council has is to make sure the planning is done correctly, and we want to make sure that as many families enjoy the lifestyle here in Ipswich, and particularly having an affordable lifestyle, so families can live the kind of lifestyle that they want. So we would love to work with the UDIA to make sure that we can have really well planned communities in Ipswich.
Thank you. I'd now like to take this one to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Passed, thank you. Moving on to item number 18, the extension to contract with the RSPCA for pound services. I will invite Mr Graham Kane to the lectern to answer any questions for us. Just a brief understanding of what this means for us as well.
Thank you, Councillor. The pound is actually managed currently through a contract arrangement and has been since 2016. The contract that was entered into was a 3-year contract with a 2 separate 1-year extensions, so a 3 + 1 + 1 contract. Currently we're in the 4th year of that contract. There is an opportunity for council to go into the 5th year of the contract by exercising an option. There have been some initial discussions with the RSPCA, who are keen to partner with council into the future. The contract is quite a large contract. It's in the order of $1.8 million per year. So it's quite significant. As part of the arrangements, we had to verify that the RSPCA were meeting all of their contractual obligations, which we have done in a separate report, which is included as an attachment. So the proposal was for council to potentially enter into that final year of that contract whilst we are organising potential redevelopment of the pound at that site or at another site.
Great. Open the floor to any questions for Mr Kane. I guess I have one for you in that the decision to have the final extension be awarded to the RSPCA, it probably makes sense for our council to do so in knowing that future years spent on pound and potential new facilities or even relocation, noting that we'll have to go to tender next year, the timing feels right in terms of the monies being spent and having them potentially advise us as to, as a stakeholder, how we move forward in the new spends and potentially the new pound facility in 2023 and 24.
Yes, and through the Chair, we've actually been dealing with ELT already, and there's been a lot of work done in terms of working with the Infrastructure Environment Department, also with our Property Office, about the options that are available to us at other sites or at our current site to meet our contractual obligations, but also to look at the long-term best benefit for council out of how we manage our animal management facility.
And thank you. Mr Kane, anyone further questions?
Mr Kane, thank you. Just looking at page 675, we're talking about the full 1 October 19 to 30 September 2020 annual fee for service provided by the RSPCA is $1.8 million. So this here is just looking at us ratifying that, or you're looking at something past September?
No,
that's what we're currently
purely in terms of that 1-year extension of that money. What actually happens, there is a clause in the contract that talks about a potential increase, but usually there's a formula around that about CPI increases. It's not a review of the whole structure. It's purely that sort of process.
Thank you, Mr Kane.
Thank you.
Through the Chair, sorry.
Sorry, Councillor.
Morning, Mr Kane.
Morning.
I notice that with pound redevelopment, to continue at the current site, there are some areas that need to be addressed with regards to current facilities, being the insulation structure used to house animals and replacement of existing cat cages, total coming to a cost of $200,000. Will the expenditure of that have to come before council for approval, or is that included as part of the?
Through the Chair, we've actually been working with the Infrastructure and Environment Department. What's required, there's basically a few sheds that allow for overflow of animals, particularly cats at the pounds. In summer, obviously, they become very hot. There are animal welfare requirements. About temperature, we've done actually monitoring. When it is hot, they do exceed slightly. Purely, it was about, in terms of that structure, it was about putting in some insulation and a ceiling into some, if you'd like, something like a garage, a tin garage, in terms of the style of the shed, to give you some idea what it is. In terms of cat cages, we're constantly replacing those. We get quite a call for cat cages and the usage of those through the community, so that's a very conservative number, and we think we'll be able to work through that with what we've got and just gradually replacing as we go. So there wouldn't be any further call for funding in relation to that.
So that forms part of the standard operational budget for the pound?
Yes, as part of the ongoing processes, we certainly do that because obviously with wear and tear, the actual cages becoming inoperable as we move on. It's a constant process to renew those.
No further questions, Mr. Kane. Thank you very much. I now ask for a mover on the item. Mayor Harding, and a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Doyle. I open the floor up for any discussion with regards to this. Mayor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. In the interest of making sure that, again, we're a transparent, open council, I'd like to bring out what the cost and the implications are front and centre in the recommendation, so it's quite easy for the people of Ipswich to see what kind of money it is, their money. So I certainly would like to have included in that particular recommendation the cost, or the rough cost of what this will be.
Yeah, happy to take the amendment.
See, I'm not sure what kind of...
Yeah, that's fine.
1.8 plus CPI or something like that.
Yeah, we can say in the order of, is it $1.8 million, the exact number?
Just over 1.8 is the current year. Or just CPI is not that high.
Yeah, we could say in the order of 1.8 extension at in the order of $1.8 million plus CPI.
If that's okay.
And I guess Councillor Doyle just needs to agree to that amendment.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion?
Just a question to the Mayor. Would you consider that a good general recommendation for these?
Through the Chair, yes, Councillor Cuswell, I would like more for the council officers to put those things front and centre. I've been highlighting that in previous meetings to put it front and centre so that people of Ipswich know how their money is being spent rather than being hidden away in reports. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to take this one to the vote. All those in favour? Votes unanimous. Passed. Thank you. Moving on to item number 19, the Community CAT program, and I will get the relevant council officer to come and speak to that. Just your name and position too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. John Pucalis is my name, and I'm the Animal Management Operations Manager. So this report that's been prepared is in relation to a proposal from the Australian Pet Welfare Foundation, and that's for them to undertake a program to reduce the population of stray kittens and cats in the Ipswich local government area. The program is proposed to run for 5 years, and funding is sought from council for both a financial contribution as well as some in-kind services. The total cash value of the funding is in the order of $360,000. And on top of that, there's the in-kind services that council would be required to provide to support the program. It's important to note it's a trial research program, and it's aimed to reduce the amount of unwanted stray cats and kittens within the community. Basically, the program is where cats are trapped and then desexed and then returned back into the area where they were caught. And this obviously prevents them from breeding, and the theory is that it will reduce the stray cat population over time. Now that in turn, according to the proposal, will lead to savings to council in relation to obviously the cost of managing those stray cats in the community every year, and the associated costs with officers' time and effort involved, and also with caring for those cats and finding an option to deal with them, such as euthanasing them if they can't be rehomed. An initial evaluation was done of the proposal, and there's been several risks that have been identified. Those risks are highlighted in the report and would need to be mitigated before, in my view, that Council could support or endorse that program. We note that the request has come post-delivery of the 2020-21 budget, and so there's no funding. It's not in our operational plan, so at present there would have to be an amendment to the budget if Council was to contribute financially and support the program. As such, the recommendation brought forth is that we decline, or Council decline, the request from Australian Pet Welfare Foundation to participate in the trial cat reduction program for 2021. It's not in our operational plan, and that, however, we understand the importance of reducing the stray cat population and responsibly looking after animals in the community, and the other recommendation would be that we reconsider the proposal looking forward into the 21-22 budget.
Thank you. Any questions from...
Through the Chair. Mr Picallis, I note the statistics listed in the report on impounded cats, that from 2015 moving forward through to 2018 there was quite a substantial increase reaching to 2018, and the number of cats captured, I assume that is. Note 2019 it dropped. Is there any understanding of the reasoning for that?
Yeah, so at one stage in those years from 2015 to 2018, Council had a drop-off facility at the pound, so people could turn up to the pound and put into these temporary holding facilities cats and other... Yeah. They were removed for 2019, and we found that that attributed to less people coming in and dropping them off. They had to come in and actually speak with Council and face-to-face interactions rather than just, I suppose, pulling up and just dumping the cat and going. So we think that contributed to the reduction in the amount of cats that were brought into the pound, just due to that fact that they had to interact and deal with someone in Council, and they could no longer just drop them off. And it was a welfare issue too in relation to the care of those cats. If someone dropped those cats off, on a Saturday morning, and potentially no one would deal with that cat for some time.
Oh.
So, or late at night time, and then it wouldn't be the next business day before anyone would attend to that cat. So there was some issues with that regard as well.
Yeah, through the Chair, just looking at that same table for 2019, 1,801 cats, if I'm reading it correctly, 10% of those were returned to the owner, so there'd still be about 1,600 cats that weren't returned. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So under this proposal, it says that any unclaimed cats would be put back into the community. Is that, am I reading the proposal correctly?
So the unclaimed cats, say, if you're looking at 2019, say you're 1,600 cats. So some of those cats, if they were suitable for the project, would be desexed and released back.
But just released where they were caught?
Back in the vicinity. That's the proposal under the program. Back in the vicinity of where they were located. So some will be unable to participate in the program, is my understanding, because of the health factors. Some will go to be rehomed, but the ones that are deemed suitable by the program, I suppose, if you could call it that, will be released back into the community. And that was one of the risk factors we identified in relation to the dissatisfaction of the community who complained about the nuisance the cat's causing, and then the cat ends up back in the community again.
Because the desexing is just one issue involved. It's wandering cats, people going into neighbours' properties, and we're taking would be taking the cats back to the very environment where people were complaining.
Yeah, and that's clearly identified in the report, that's a risk for us, because the whole reason why we've captured the cat is because it's creating a nuisance to the community, and we'd have to, very seriously think of what was going to happen in the program when we release that cat back in that vicinity. And I've already had some discussions with Professor Rand about that particular issue and what would need to be done to make sure that we don't have a high level of community dissatisfaction with the research program. So that's certainly an issue that needs to be overcome or considered.
Through the Chair, if I may, I'm not a technical expert on the subject matter, However, my understanding is that returning the de-sex cat to the capture site works as a lever to prevent the new stray cats from entering into that environment, keeps them away because they are somewhat territorial. The de-sexing of the cat reduces the activities of that particular cat performing the activities that annoy residents, and part of the process is that the operators of the program consult and interact with the community residents in that general area, and try to gain someone to foster the cat, not so much take ownership of the cat, but foster it, and if they want to take ownership, they can. And it just reduces the impact on the residents in the area with regard to troublesome cats that would replace that one if you kept it out of the environment, euthanased it. One thing that struck me in reading the report provided by the operators...
Do you expressly have a question for Mr McAllis? Or
no, I was just addressing that item, was the sheer volume of euthanasing of healthy cats, which...
Probably more appropriate to have this discussion once we have a mover and a seconder on it, so...
Sure.
I'll just ask for any further questions for Mr McAllis specifically, and then we can return to that a bit later, if that's okay, Councillor Milligan. Mayor Harding.
Thank you, Chair, Mr Packles. Just reading through this, and obviously my understanding is the Australian Pet Welfare Foundation approached Council and made a presentation to some councillors, and then you're commissioned to do this report. Would that be?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. What is our current policy when we get a complaint about a cat or someone drops off a stray cat? What's our policy?
Yep, so there's three ways we generally deal with that, and one is we've provided on our website an opportunity for members of the community to draft up a letter and put it into the neighbours, or the home of where the cat comes from, and say, hey, your cat's causing an issue, and hopefully they can resolve that without council action. Otherwise, we have a program where we loan out cat traps, and then if the cat is caught, then the customer brings the cat into our pound, we impound that cat, and depending on whether or not we can identify an owner, we look at potential compliance action. And the other situation is where the customer makes a complaint because they know where the cat comes from, and then our compliance officers will go out and look at taking compliance action, ranging from just working with the customer to start with to, enforcement action under using our legislation. So there's sort of the three options that how we deal with cats that are causing a nuisance in the community.
So if we have a stray cat, and I speak as a cat owner with two cats that are microchipped and have a cat enclosure, what happens if you have a stray cat that's not microchipped and it comes to the pound?
So if
no one claims it.
Yep. So you have
It's euthanised, or?
Well, there's two options that can happen to it. So if it's not claimed, it's handed over to the RSPCA as part of our agreement in relation to disposal of the cats, and then they'll do an assessment of that cat. And if they think it's worthy of being rehomed, then it'll go into their rehoming program. And if it can't be rehomed, or it doesn't meet the criteria to be rehomed, then it'll be euthanised. So that's the process.
And what time frame? How long would the RSPCA keep that cat before it was if it wasn't adopted?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure.
Both our cats were adopted from the RSPCA.
Yeah, look, I'm really not sure on how long they would keep them for, but my understanding is if it's suitable for rehoming, they make every attempt to advertise that cat, not only within, say, the Ipswich or the Brisbane area, they do it sort of statewide, so they make every attempt to dispose of that cat through a rehoming process. But generally the cats that, and you'll see in their statistics, the cats that they say are suitable for rehoming, they have a rehoming rate, and it's right up there in the high 90s. So most of those cats that they determine are suitable for rehoming get rehomed. The ones that aren't get euthanised. So
my understanding, recommendation A, this is called a trial cat reduction program. I'm having difficulty understanding how this is a cat reduction program when we're taking cats if they're not adopted out, and look at the figures there, up to 90% aren't returned from what I can gather. Well, I guess it depends on adoption rates.
Yeah, so
this doesn't appear to be a cat reduction program or a stray cat reduction program. It seems to be a stray cat increase program.
Well, there would be less cats in the community initially the way we're operating currently, but the theory behind this is that over time, those cats that are caught and desexed won't breed, and they'll eventually, I suppose, grow old and die, and then there'll be less and less cats to breed, so that stray cat population, is my understanding, will decline over time.
So I still don't understand that, because if just say we have a stray cat, and if it's not rehomed,
Yes.
it's sadly euthanised.
Yes.
So wouldn't that, how can us releasing the stray cat back into the wild be a cat reduction program?
Well, it's the long term, because that cat won't create any more cats, I suppose. If you can, the same as if you euthanise that cat, it's not going to create any more cats either. But it's about, do we just have 100% euthanasia rate of animals, or do we, try and improve the rate of, or reduce the rate of, euthanising animals as part of our, mandate in council here. So it's more costly to have rehoming programs and have contracts like that. And if you had 100% euthanasia rate, you could potentially reduce costs, but whether the community accepts that council should be doing that, that's the responsible way to go on is the thing.
Obviously it's a last resort. I mean, I'll speak as someone who's adopted 2 cats from the RSPCA.
Yeah.
But I have spoken to a few people in the community about this, and there was certainly the concern or the objections I hear from people who are cat owners, who are responsible cat owners, is that if we're letting out more stray cats back, even if they've been desexed, what will be the impact on our bird population, and as well as, people who did make complaints about cats for their behaviour, how will this benefit the residents of Ipswich?
Yeah, and it's obviously a long-term proposal and it's a trial research program as well. We need to point that out, that the proposal is to see whether or not this particular program will reduce the cats. The theory says it will, but the program would need to run for you to analyse it down the track and see whether or not it did have a reduction in stray cat population.
And how much is this program costing?
So the total over a 5-year period was $360,000. With on top of that, with some in-kind services, with council officers being deployed to assist with, retrieving cat traps and things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just got.
You go.
Just to clarify, the cats would be, under this proposal, would be desexed but not microchipped?
So they'd be microchipped, desexed, they'd have part of their ear moved like a little tag so that they would be identifiable.
So we'd take the cat, not we, the cats would go back to the residential vicinity where they were caught? If they were caught again, could the cats just keep on going back and forth?
Well, that's something we'd have to work through in relation to that risk, in relation to community, dissatisfaction. So you'd look at, and I've spoken to the Professor Rand about this, is, we couldn't have a situation like that where we're continually facilitating a nuisance. We're there, the very reason we're there is to resolve that nuisance that the cat's causing. So, but these are all the things that would need to be worked through before any final approval of a the way the program operated was to be agreed on would be my view.
To the Chair. Sorry.
Councillor Madsen.
Yes, I'm of the opinion that the status quo isn't something necessarily to defend. I think we need to do better here. Can you please outline what Council's plan is to improve management of cats in the wild? Because this puts a huge strain on Council resources as it is currently.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a current plan, anything like what we've, the proposal is. And at the moment it's, we have a certain way of dealing with stray cats and nuisance cats, and absolutely, we should all be looking at ways we can improve our services, and that's something, that I'd undertake going forward. Is there, a better way to deal with the community and resolve these issues? So I point out this is merely a proposal put forward that we've had a look at and said, well, here's the issues with it, and obviously that's what's being discussed here. But yeah, we don't have a current cat management strategy. We did have one running for the last couple of years. It's been mentioned in the report, but we're due to have a new one.
Mayor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. What's the success, or what have been the outcomes of this program elsewhere?
Yeah, so there's some data and some research papers to say that it's effective in reducing the stray population of cats. I'm not a scientist and I don't, fully...
So whereabouts which council has that been worked in Australia?
In Australia, there is some
Fine, so-
councils operating the program, is my
The
understanding.
council in Australia was doing this. It would be the first. That was my understanding, or by?
Well, in the documentation, it says that there's a couple of councils. I think one in Victoria have commenced the program, but we're not at a stage where it's been evaluated or anything like that. So, but overseas, there is some literature that I've been provided in relation to overseas programs, but.
So there's currently no data around the success or failure of a program like this within Australia.
Look, I'd have to get back to you on that because I'm not the expert on it. I've seen some documentation and some papers for overseas programs, but I haven't seen anything for research papers for Australia running a program similar to this.
And just in closing, for Mr McAllis, I'd like to, on behalf of the councillors, thank you for answering what can be some very technical questions. And I know that, we tasked you to have a look at this program and potentially implementing it into, an operational plan for council. And just noting that there was a lot to read through with this plan, and where you come from is not an expert of the subject matter of the actual program. It's that you're thinking, how can you take this plan and incorporate it into council? So I think that some of the unclear questions from us and maybe the responses that we're given here aren't necessarily a lack of knowledge on the subject matter. It's just that we have been given a report and a study from someone. So council officers had to interpret that as to how we could implement it with us. So the report outlines that, yes, while there is subject matter and a study and a particular program that's looking to be rolled out, we still need to accept that council needs to be able to blend smoothly into implementing something like this as well. So yeah, I just want to thank you very much for answering all of those questions that you could. And Councillor Johnnick's going to go again.
Just one more question through the chair. The cats that are adopted back out, that are successful, are they desexed?
Yes, they are. So all cats that are rehomed are microchip desexed.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I promise no more questions.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, so I'll have a mover for this one, please. Just noting, yeah.
Sorry, through you, Mr Chair, I'd like to move a motion that's variant to recommendation A.
Maybe you'll propose a recommendation C? Yeah. Or varying number 1. C.
So the recommendation is in 2 parts, A and B. I'd like to move motion that is slight variation on the recommendation A.
Okay.
Amend.
He's entitled to it.
Yep.
If I could.
How would you like that to look?
Just quickly a bit of background. In discussion this morning with...
I will just need to move that before we discuss
I'll move it. That Council approves a pilot study of a cat reduction... Council approves in principle...
So Vicky can get it up on the screen for all the councillors. Councillor Milligan.
Sure.
So
the Council approves in principle a pilot study of a cat reduction program. Reduction program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Reduction.
In Rosewood and Goodna, with no financial support or in-kind contribution from Ipswich City Council. End. And that item B, that was the end of that, and that item B basically remains the same, that Council reconsiders the full proposal as part of Council's budget discussion for 21-22.
So that's actually a C, or that's separate to...
That would be in lieu of recommendation A.
Okay. So A goes?
Yeah.
And has Councillor Milligan got a seconder for that?
May I ask a question about that? Or I have to wait left?
Seconder.
I'm the seconder.
Okay, Councillor Kunzelman seconds that.
I have a question too.
So
I can give some background on how that
Yes,
arrived at that.
I will open that up for discussion now. Thank you, Councillor Milligan.
So I can proceed. So through you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, we just clarify this because what's disappeared is the original motion.
I'd like to.
From the officer.
Yeah.
I didn't think we
That
can
need-
get rid of an
I thought
officer.
that should be recommendation C, because if that's the case, then I'd foreshadow a motion to reinstate recommendation A as an option for council
Yeah,
to.
but that's already there.
that's what Councillor Milligan moved.
There was no
That's correct.
original mover or seconder. This
Yeah.
is the.
I move that.
Yeah,
Councillor Kunz.
that's the original motion. So the staff recommendation can be resurrected by a range of forms that you've all been trained in.
Foreshadowing. Yeah.
We can ask for.
So
I'll foreshadow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that we restore original recommendation A, and the recommendation by Councillor Milligan be put to as a C option.
Is that appropriate, CEO?
Yep.
Great.
And I'll foreshadow the proposed C not be included.
So this is the original staff recommendation.
Yes.
All right. You'll get a test. I'll work you through it. That'll be all right.
We'll need a seconder for Councillor Tull.
No, you don't need seconders for foreshadowed. The foreshadowed will only come before you should the substantive
foreshadowed
motion
before it's
lose.
foreshadowed.
And Councillor
So
Doyles will go first.
He's right of yeah, okay.
So now,
Okay, so we
now debate Councillor Milligan's motion with the understanding that there's two alternatives should they fail.
okay, great. Open for discussion. Councillor Milligan, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this morning, with discussion with Dr. Anna, I'd like to acknowledge presence of Dr. Jackie Rand. She is Executive Director and Chief Scientist of the Australian Pet Welfare Foundation, Emeritus Professor of University of Queensland, sitting in the gallery here. That her organisation has very recently been able to obtain self-funding to operate the pilot program in the suburbs of Rosewood and Goodna. Just point out that the benefits of that program, being the direct investment of more than $1.7 million from APWF and RSPCA, along with other partners, in the desexing, vaccination, parasite control and community education about responsible cat caring behaviours. Also, there is the reduction in cat-related complaints that council would receive due to the program.
Potentially.
That significantly reduced cat impoundments and, in particular, the high euthanasia rate of healthy animals, and of course the on-flowing impact that has on staff who perform that function. It's not a very good task for anyone to have to undertake, and there have been studies that shows that has impact on the mental health of people who conduct that type of activity on behalf of the community. That there would also be reduced biosecurity risks from free-roaming undesexed cats, including reduced disease risk to humans and pets. And a desexed cat, I'd like to point out, is also much less likely to engage in predation on wildlife than an entire cat. And the potential savings of infrastructure costs to council, along the lines of the proposed new animal shelter for the need for space for housing, for cat housing, and that the national and international recognition for the city of Ipswich in effective urban cat management. The risks identified in the report by the Australian Pet Welfare Foundation undertaking the the study themselves. That mitigates the risks to council. In terms of civil liability, that there would be protection from civil liability arising from desexing an owned cat without the owner's permission, that cats that are not microchipped would be desexed. If a cat is captured that is microchipped, it would be returned to the owner, of course. And the Australian Pet Welfare Foundation has their own civil liability insurance. With respect to lawfulness of the program, with respect to this amendment, the concerns about council officers breaching council's own laws are mitigated because compliance officers would not be involved in the program. The Australian Pet Welfare Foundation, in collaboration with the RSPCA, would capture the cat, and if found to be owned, as evidenced by a microchip, the current processes of council would be followed to return it to its owner. The foundation would comply with council's local laws, and if not amended, will wait the 3 days after capture for the cat to be claimed. And that Queensland Government and Biosecurity Queensland have provided a permit to proceed with the trial of the cat reduction program in Rosewood, Goodna and Redbank Plains. So without council's support, the program would still go underway. With regards to council reputation, the APWF program will not interfere with the current council practices to deal with cat-related complaints. Also, the APWF will forward customer complaints about cats that are received to council. If a complaint about a cat is made to council, council officers, of course, would then proceed as per current practice. And also, the cat reduction program involving the RSPCA and APWF would work in parallel with current council practices. The biosecurity restrictions risk is that a biosecurity permit has been obtained by APWF and RSPCA, and they would comply with the conditions stipulated in the permit. Finally, the mitigation of community and other consultation risk. The APWF has been consulting with the community already and conducting a scientific survey in Rosewood to determine community preferences for cat management. The preliminary outcomes are similar to other surveys conducted in other parts of Australia, including Brisbane and overseas, showing approximately 80% of people support non-lethal methods of cat management. So, with respect to there being no impact on this year's budget of council, and that those risks I've addressed are mitigated, I would ask my fellow committee members to support the amendment that I have moved.
So now we've got to speak. We can offer a speaking against that.
Yeah.
If the chair has specific questions with regards to the subject matter discussed, am I allowed to?
Yeah, individual members of the council can query the fellow councillor if they wish, but you also should speak for and against, given we've got indication of opposition to the proposal.
Councillor Doyle has the right of way there in the against. So I think Councillor Doyle will be specifically speaking against the fact that the original motion was taken out.
Well, there's a motion here that's before the chair, and Councillor Doyle has proposed a foreshadowed motion, so she or any other councillor may wish to speak against the motion that Councillor Milligan's put.
Through the chair, I just have a question that I want to pose in relation to.
Go ahead.
Sorry, and it may be a comment. So it's speaking obviously to the issue around risk management, civil liability and the lawfulness of the program. I'm not sure that with respect to Councillor Milligan and what has been proposed, but I'm not sure that we could say it absolutely puts potential liability for the council beyond doubt. This absolutely needs a health check to be vetted by our lawyers, because I do see that we are still wide open to potential responsibility here and litigation. You know, there's mention of, I think, was there a mention of an indemnity potentially from APWF, but that's something we would need to consider and weigh up. Just on the fly here on the floor, I think we can't approve something in principle without.
Yeah, Councillor Tully, would you like to speak?
Yeah, the original recommendation, of course, was not to approve it for the current financial year, and then to look at the proposal as part of our budget discussions for the following year. Then we've got a motion now, which I think is putting the cart before the horse, and it's not very clear that we today approve in principle a pilot study of a cat reduction program in 2 areas. Now, Councillor Doyle has raised some legitimate legal issues. If I could just expand on why I would support the retention of the original A and B in the officer's report, and then to outline my foreshadowed motion or an amendment to the retention of that proposed paragraph C, because there are questions that need to be answered. It's not just a matter of approving something in principle today, a pilot program that we don't know the details of. We were already told, cats could be going back to the same place where they were caught on multiple occasions. So I'm not moving it now, but I'm suggesting that if Councillor Doyle's foreshadowed motion is agreed to, that paragraph C be changed to that council officers prepare a report on a possible pilot study of a cat reduction program with no financial support or in-kind contribution from Ipswich City Council. That will allow us to look at that particular issue in detail, which we're not doing today because a pilot program is quite different from what the original proposal was.
Councillor Doyle, sensible?
Yeah, absolutely, and that could then address the legal concerns we have.
And I believe Councillor Kunzelman would like to speak for.
I would like to speak for.
Excellent.
And also I acknowledge Dr. Rand and her work in this area. I think it's not a very good idea that we just close the door on this program, and I think that we should consider it and take some pride in being leaders in this. And even if the ultimate outcome is that we consider it for next financial year.
Yeah, and I guess the greater discussion around this new report being prepared with regards to the feasibility, now we get to look at it once more, so it would be a supplementary report that Councillor Tully. Have you foreshadowed that?
Well,
you amended your foreshadowed motion.
Through the chair, if I could suggest, perhaps to Councillor Doyle, it says foreshadowed that no recommendation C. What I'm suggesting is that the proposed recommendation C under your foreshadowed motion be changed to that wording.
I agree.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
We've got to really debate the matter.
Point of order is that we should be debating the first motion and not discussing the compilation of a foreshadowed motion. But with that respect, now that discussion has taken place, I would be happy to accept to amend my initial motion as per the wordage of what Councillor Tully has suggested.
And I would agree.
All right. Can we just get our wording, Vicky? Let's just make sure we get exactly what's happened.
Yeah, it's mine we're reinstating recommendation A, and the current one that's there that Councillor Milligan put forward is going to be recommendation C.
But as amended.
As amended as per Councillor Tully's. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's right.
There is mine.
So we've got, sorry, A.
Did we go back to the original?
This one here, so that's the original
Yes,
one.
thank you, Vicky, that's correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that I've got it correct. B becomes Councillor, Councillor Tully's.
No.
We'll keep B.
Keep B.
And Councillor Tully's becomes C, is that right?
Yes, thank you, Vicky.
Right.
I'm sorry for the confusion.
No, that's all right.
This is good. This is good. Good practice should be doing. So
Should chronologically, Mr Chair, would C go to B and B go to C, but I mean, it doesn't really matter because they're all individual statements, but I don't know. Does it need chronologically arrangement?
it's in the hands of the council.
I don't think it makes much difference.
I'd move C to B and B to C.
Councillor Kunzelman?
C should refer to a pilot program, shouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, that's what a possible pilot program.
I understand that Councillor Wigan wants to move C into B, swap B and C. Is that what you're after, Councillor Wigan, through the chair?
Makes more sense.
Only so that it reads chronologically. That would be the sequential process.
But anyway, yeah. And so the foreshadowed motion of Councillor Tully and Councillor Doyle,
They disappear,
they're gone.
and Councillor Milligans has agreed to a variation, and the seconder has agreed to the variation.
I have.
You agreed?
So there's peace in our time. Beautiful.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vicky. Is there any further discussion on this?
Okay. The mayor.
Sorry.
Mayor Harding.
A discussion, and from the Deputy Mayor, and I'm not for or against, I'm just wanting to be crudely clear, the civil liability, it talks about the council may carry liability and circumstance in this program. It also talks about the lawfulness of the program. We may need to change our local laws, which again, I'm not against, but just if we do this, it looks like we have to change our local laws. I'm very cognisant of the council reputation, if there's going to be any community dissatisfaction, and we're probably going to have people who are pro and against this. And also just know that that members of the community may not be pleased with this type of response and roaming cats going back to the area where they were found, and note the biosecurity restrictions, which we do have a letter for a couple of years. I'll be very interested to know what the councillors in Division 2 and 4 have to say this, because obviously we're looking at as well, we're not looking at Goodna and Rosewood anymore. Okay, that's fine. I guess I'm just very cognisant of the fact that doing this will mean changes to our local laws, that we may be opening ourselves up to liability and being sued, as well as the fact that not sure, I get a lot of complaints about stray cats and things like that, so I'm just very cognisant of how successful this may be.
Yeah. I agree with that, and I think that it's important to note that financial constraints were not the only ones here within the officer's report. And Mr. McAllis had flagged several other potential hurdles in implementing something like this. So it wasn't just that there was no money in the Capital Works program. It was that there are a few issues that need to be teased out a little bit more. But the main thing that was that had this project hamstrung was that there actually was no capital contribution for outlining this. So the preparation of a second report with no financial implications should detail to us what are the risks associated with this. Councillor Jonick.
Yeah, and just through the chair, I guess I needed clarification on how exactly the reduction in stray cats would actually be achieved through this program now and into the future, considering that the cats through our policy at the moment that are going for adoption are desexed anyway. So I get it.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jonick, and I think that will be something that we need to include in the report that comes back to council if this is seen through in a vote in the affirmative by the majority. Councillor Kunzelman.
It strikes me that report should also include some kind of program for notification to the public of what's going on, and
CEO, what level of detail do we need here in terms of that report that's being prepared? Councillor Tully, did you have a comment to make?
Well, I certainly agree with that, but I think it should just be a comprehensive report which would cover those issues.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be supportive of cats that haven't been claimed, going back to the very area where people were catching them or had traps out. You know, you can imagine a truck pulling up and 30 or 40 cats just being released and back into the community. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And from what Councillor Jonik says, that it's not apparent to me that that there would be a significant reduction in a particular area. There would be if those stray cats, which weren't claimed, weren't released back into the very community they came from.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Tully. And I'd just like to make note on behalf of Dr. Up in the
Rand.
Dr. Rand.
Yep.
Thank you. I would like to acknowledge the fact that there is option for you to participate publicly in next week's council meeting with regards to this. So fear not. You know, we do hear you. We've read through some of the stuff. There's lots of questions here that you might be able to go back onto the live stream and detail in a response publicly to the council next week. So you will have an opportunity to take away some of the comments of the councillors and mayor today and formulate, you know, a little 3 to 5 minute piece that you'll be able to have in a public presentation next week at the ordinary council meeting as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and in doing so I think that we should take this to the vote.
Councillor Milligan has a right. He's tried to reply and he had his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You actually answered my question with your last statement.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Milligan. I thought so. Great. So we can now take this to the vote.
Councillor Milligan doesn't want to take his right of reply.
You're satisfied?
I'm satisfied, Mr. Chair, that we have given this a good run around the table.
Really?
Thank you. And thanks, Vicky. So we'll take this to the vote. All those in favour of recommendations A, B and C, and just be careful with the wording there. Everyone's happy and they've read it. Great.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous. And there is opportunity for public participation next week. Thank you, Dr. Rand. Great. Moving on. Item number 18, the extension to contract... beg your pardon. Where are we?
Number 20.
20, sorry.
20, which is Court Action Status Report.
Court Action Status Report. Now, fellow councillors and mayor, do we wish to have the relevant council officer come down and speak to us with regards to the court action reports? Yes. So I invite Brett Davies, Mr. Brett Davies, down to the lectern. Just noting that this pertains to legal matters, so we probably will have to go into closed session to discuss in greater detail some of the questions that we might have for Mr. Davies. Is everyone in agreement that it's in the best interest of the council to go into closed session for,
I think we've got to specify the legal or planning.
Yeah, look, work out what, if and when you want to go into closed session. If you do, you need to move a motion
at the time
to go into closed session, and for the purposes of, for the reasons that you'll need to specify those reasons.
Wouldn't that be now?
Discuss legal matters.
Okay.
But you don't need to close until you need to close, if that makes sense.
Great. So I guess, would you like Mr. Davies to go through line by line, or would the council like to pick out a particular item that they wish to discuss in terms of the court action reports?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm happy with that process, and I'd start on the first two, which are in Division 2. So depending upon whether or not, they're probably just procedural issues of where we're at with item 1, which is the CB development one. It talked about a court review on the 13th of July, and the next one at Ascot Street, Goodna, on the 16th of July. So if I could just get an update of where each of those are, please.
Definitely.
Brett Davey.
So, Chair, we do have a confidential report here on, I think, 5 matters. Would that be correct? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 matters. Maybe make sure that those ones aren't discussed here. We'll go into closed session.
Yeah,
Would that be okay,
we'll
Chair?
be led by Mr. Davies on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Brett Davey, Manager Development Planning. Councillors, with updates on those two matters, given the proximity to recent review and action that's required, I would suggest they are confidential matters that warrant closure of the meeting. Other than that, if you were happy to proceed with the report as noted and as prepared, that wouldn't apply.
Well, no, I'd like it answered, but where we're at with those.
Yep. So at present, both of those matters are proceeding through without prejudice processes. The review processes set down the conduct of the parties in respect to that without prejudice process. Right. In terms of discussion of the outcome of those, that's the element that's subject to legal privilege.
So on each of those dates, through the chair, there was no substantive change to the current situation?
No. Reviews generally are not a substantive change. They're something that goes through the next process and set down some steps. It'll also review what has occurred and whether or not the parties have complied with the obligations of the court in terms of conduct as well as previous directions.
Thank you.
Just looking for further direction as to which specific action we'd like to discuss.
The Chair, I'm happy to go into closed session to discuss the confidential matters, the others.
To discuss the list of confidential matters, yeah. Do we need to move it to go into closed session there?
I'll move to go into closed session.
To discuss legal matters?
Those 6 legal matters that are deemed as confidential in our packs.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland.
So just wait for people to leave.
Session.
Put it.
So we'll... All those in favour? That's unanimous. So we'll go into closed session.
alive again.
Thank you. Just waiting for just wait for the members of the public.
If there are any. Just need to move that initial report, which is
Yes. So do I have a mover for the report? Thank you, Mayor Harding, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Is there any further discussion we'd like to make on those reports other than for noting? Great, thank you very much. We'll take that to the vote. All those in favour? And it's unanimous. Okay, so moving on to item 21, exercise of delegation report. Is there a feeling amongst the mayor or councillors that we wish to have this discussed with council officer? No.
That's just to receive and notice.
Yeah, just receiving it, yeah. Great, thanks councillor Tully. Do I have a mover for that in that case?
Yeah, I'll move it.
Thank you, councillor Tully, and a seconder. Thank you, councillor Doyle. Just noting that this is a report to be noted, we'll take it to the vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving to item number 22, Business Transformation Project number 9, Policies, Infrastructure and Environment Department. Is there a feeling amongst the mayor or councillors that we'd like to have the council officer come and explain that to us? Just noting that we have had this happen a few times already in meeting, and while the organisation is in a transitional period, this will continue to happen over time, I guess would be the overriding sentiment there behind this. So,
I just have a question through.
Yes, councillor Tully.
The date of that report, this is 22, is 30th of October 2019. Is that only just coming up now?
For the Transformation Project number 9.
I think there's an error in that report date. I'm not sure. No.
Who might be able
Well, it
to
wouldn't take 9 months, 10 months to come up, surely.
No, I've got no idea how that's come up. Good pickup. I didn't pick.
I didn't read anything in there, so I just...
Sorry, Chair, whereabouts is this?
Right at the heading of the front
The
page.
heading, oh, sorry, the 30th of October, yes.
It could be, excuse me, Chair, it could be that it was moved a few times and the date hasn't been changed. That's a possibility.
Okay.
So probably need...
Ms. Kavanagh's suggesting it was. There's no reason. No.
Typo.
So that's a current report?
Yeah, it's a current report, yes.
Thank you.
And just for the sake of knowing what the recommendations of the report are, that A, the policy titled Street Lighting as adopted by Council 30 June 15 be repealed, and that B, that the Council policy disposal of non-reusable spoil as adopted by Council 17 September 2014 also be repealed. So if there's no, is there any further discussion on that you'd wish to?
You have a move in a second?
Well,
Yeah, I'd move that.
Yeah.
go,
Oh,
Councillor
maybe.
Tully. And a seconder for this? Councillor Kunzelman, thank you. In that case, we'll take it to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item number 23, the Conflicts of Interest Policy. Mayor and councillors, is there any specific questions that we would need to invite Council Officer down to answer for us? Great, thank you. So we might move to, we might need a mover for that one.
I'll move.
Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman, and seconded by Councillor Doyle.
Discussion.
Yeah, now we'll open it up for discussion, and Mayor Harding, lead the way.
Thank you, Chair. I note that the Council has policies in place for conflicts of interest for councillors and for the Chief Executive Officer and the ELT. This one's in particular for employees. So I commend the organisation. I know this policy doesn't need to come to us, but I thought it was really great for the organisation to show this to us, to show the obligations that council employees have in accepting the Queen's money in going forward, that we need to do under the obligations that they have under the Code of Conduct. So I commend the organisation for showing this and being open and transparent. And I also acknowledge in the briefings we've had that there are a number of guidelines and processes within the organisation which will help employees be able to adhere to their obligations.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this one? We'll take it to a vote then. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item number 24, motions for 2020 Local Government Association of Queensland Conference. Do we need a council officer to speak to this, Mayor or councillors? No?
Possibly not.
Possibly not? Okay, so I'll get a mover for this item.
Yeah, I'll move it, but I want to propose an amendment.
Great, so that's moved by Councillor Tully and seconded by Mayor Harding. And we'll open it for discussion. Councillor Tully.
All right. I think that this is something that we've been aware of for a few weeks, the stop the clock provisions to be similar, if not identical, for council as it is for development applicants. It's just that one paragraph in the explanatory background over on page 2 of the attachment. It's got the LGAQ logo on, so this is attachment 1. It's the paragraph reading, the transition to the Planning Act has drastically reduced the time a council is available to assess and decide a development application. My suggestion is that we leave the wording at that point for this reason, that it talks about the permitted timeframes also limit the number of applications which can be decided at council meeting due to deemed approval and refusal provisions. Now, with a little bit of experience in local government conferences, lots of councils are different in terms of the regularity of meetings, numbers of staff and so on. It's the second sentence there that might give rise to some suggestion that we're not capable of dealing with them at council meetings if required, and that other councils may be. I think the gist of the explanation or the background is very good, except for that final sentence. So can I suggest that sentence be deleted, basically?
Okay. Yep.
Mayor and councillors, we're on page 826, just for clarity.
Sorry, I should have referenced it that way.
So it's the second sentence in the, I guess, the second paragraph, or
Yes.
the first full paragraph in that,
Yes.
in the attachment,
Yeah.
which is the permitted term frames also limit the number of applications which can be decided at a council meeting due to the deemed approval and refusal provisions of the Planning Act. So that should be deleted.
Yeah, I think it's just a lot easier if we do.
I concur with
Great.
Mr. Tully.
Now the other thing is I guess an addendum, and I've circulated the wording for an additional motion, but I don't have an explanatory background. But perhaps officers, if this is agreed to, could work on that over the next few days. It's in relation to the recent changes to the legislation in respect of mayoral and councillor vacancies. In particular, the issue that in the first 3 years of a quadrennial election, that there would not be a by-election, that it would be not even a count back, it would be the person who ran second. Now, this issue came up at the local government policy executive recently. There are many examples in Queensland where the person who ran second got less than 10% of the vote, and that there's a degree of angst in the community generally that, and time will tell, because somewhere along the line, there'll be a vacancy, and it mightn't be this year or next year or even the next 5 years, where someone could become the mayor of a city during that first 12 months when they've got 5, 6 or 7% of the vote, which I think is contrary to what most people would think as being appropriate. Now, I'm open to a suggestion with that, whether or not it shouldn't just be for the mayor, but it should be for councillors as well. In some councils, can I just preempt that at the local government conference, some councils of the 77 might think it's more appropriate just to look at who was next on the list, because they're small councils. But I think we'd have every chance of getting that agreed to if we include I emailed that.
Email, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's just adding the words mayor or councillor.
Councillor Tully, we're looking at asking for what I would like to see. This is probably really important, but I'd like to see the local government act go back to the way it was and how it dealt with this. And that in which regards that went to a by-election if the mayor's office was found vacant. And if there was a councillor, divisional councillor was vacant, it was up to the council to decide whether they would pick the next person on the list, I guess, or go to a vote or go to a by-election.
It's usually best to try to keep it as simple as
Yes.
We can understand this back and front, but when you've got a couple of delegates from 77 councils, sometimes the simple approach is better. But could I just, for the purposes of discussion now, could we just include the words "in the position of mayor or councillor" occurs within the first 3 years? I suspect that many councils will be putting up a similar motion, and it may be there'd have to be agreement between councils at the time exactly what motion, at the conference, not beforehand, what motion would actually go forward. But we've had an example in this city, and in the last few years where the runner-up got, I think, 7% of the vote. And many other examples have been put to me where the runner-up has got an extremely low number of votes. To me, it doesn't make any sense at all. You imagine state elections, if someone died in the first year and they applied the same rule, it'd change from an LNP seat to a Labor seat straight away.
Heavens above.
Or the other way around.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa. To me, it doesn't accord with... I guess the issue is... considered by the government was the saving of money. There's no doubt about that. But you've got to look at the other end of the spectrum, and I would predict that if this isn't agreed to, that it's somewhere down the track in some years to come, that there'll be outrage in some community in Queensland where someone with 10% of the vote suddenly becomes the mayor of a city or shire.
And through the chair, I have had discussions with other mayors who are, Councillor Tully is correct, other mayors are very concerned, and some mayors are joking that their councils want to put their mayors in the Pope mobile so nothing happens to them.
What, until what, March next year? Yes. This legislation doesn't actually, it's been through Parliament, it's been approved, but doesn't come into effect until October. And in relation to the mayor, of course, it's only for that first year where there's it defaults to the runner-up. But so that means in effect it'll only be in effect for a period of about 6 months. In this term of office.
And through the chair, may I ask Councillor Tully why you wouldn't do for the entire period? Why just the first 3 years?
Well, currently the council in that, I think this is still correct, that under the previous legislation the council could appoint an acting mayor but not a permanent mayor, and that's one change that's come up. Having a by-election, I guess, with 6 months to go might be considered inappropriate. I still think if this goes through our council, which it needs to do if it's going to go onto the agenda, we still need to be a little bit flexible with other similar motions from other councils just to get the sweet spot about the general feeling in Queensland, because there'll be lots of slightly different views. But I think principally most people would be horrified that someone could become mayor of a city on 5 or 10% of the vote.
Any further discussion? So I guess we'll take that to the vote if everyone's happy.
As the seconder, I agree to.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll polish something up for
next
complete full council meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, so we'll take that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Great, moving on to item number 25 now, the garage sale trail. Any councillors wish to ask questions of the council officer on this matter? No. So I'll get a mover for this particular item. Thank you, Councillor Doyle, and seconded by Councillor Kunzelman. Opening up for questions and discussion.
Thank you, Chair. And just again, it would be great if the council officers could move the amount of money that's being proposed to the recommendation, so it's front and centre for people to see.
CEO, will you take that on?
Yeah, sure.
Follow-up question, are you advocating for 4 years or 3 years? Or?
The recommendation for a 3-year period.
3 years.
Yeah.
Recommendation
Is that
for a
what-
3-year period.
Okay.
The cost of $7,819 per annum plus GST.
Would you like us to amend that, Mayor, to include the amount?
Opposed
Yep.
to the
Great.
mover and the second to add the cost of $7,819
Councillor
per
Doyle,
annum
Councillor
plus GST.
I agree.
7,000, what was it?
7,819 per annum plus GST.
Thank you. Great, happy? Thank you. Perfect. Thank you very much. So any further discussion? We'll take that one to the vote. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Passed. Moving on to the late items now, I believe. Item number 26. Submission on proposed amendments to the Development Assessment Rules, Ministers' Guidelines and Rules and Planning Regulation 2017, Economic Recovery Initiatives. Would you like to invite? Yep, so we'll invite the relevant council officer down to talk us through this late item. If at all possible, Mr. Tabulo. Thank you.
Mr. Davey?
His team members run away. 20s.
Mr. Chair, just let me see if I can get this up, please.
No hurry at all, Mr. Tabulo. Thank you very much.
It's in the late report section.
Through the chair, if I could ask
Yeah, I've
Mr.
got it.
Tabulo just to just highlight the changes due to COVID. Probably not.
So some of the changes,
okay.
Mayor and councillors,
Yeah, that's fine.
dealt with changing here's Mr Davey, he's better across it than I am, the way the notifications are given for development applications and the like. I'll pass to my colleague. Aren't you better with us?
Mr. Day.
Sorry, councillors. Brett Davey, Manager Development Planning. So this late item is a submission or proposed submission to some legislative reform the state have announced. So part of it's in response to COVID and part of it is some mechanical changes that they want to make. So if I take it from the top, the first issue is they want to extend time for development applications. So that's a sort of blanket extension for all live applications for a further 6 months. So that's live ones that we're assessing as well as ones that we've previously approved. No real issue with that, but there is some technical process to try and affect that change because I think we've got about 1,800 live applications that will affect. So there's some work there. The public notification changes, so as you'll be aware, newspaper publication in some areas has ceased, so we're not the only ones that have experienced that. So they've changed the legislation which currently requires that there be notices published in a locally distributed paper to have some options. So the options are that if there's a locally distributed paper that can still occur, or it can be done in an electronic version or an alternative. So there's some options there. The other thing of benefit, I think, in that change is that they've adjusted the way that residents are notified, so that at the moment landowners surrounding developments are notified, but the residents may not be if they're tenants. So the change requires that to happen. So that's a good initiative there. There's some mechanical changes on planning scheme, drafting and LGIP, which are really not of consequence, in my opinion.
I just interpose with a question on that very issue before
Yes.
you move on to the next
Of course.
one. This is on page 10 of 25 under Proposal 1, and that's what's been approved by the government, is that right, already?
Some of it's approved by the government already, and some of it's just a principle that they haven't yet drafted the legislation to deal with.
Okay. If you look at the second dot point under Proposal 1, if there's no hard copy local newspaper circulating the subject of, but there is an online local newspaper, that's the case in Ipswich,
Yep.
this must be used to publish the notice about the application. Well, that makes sense, but then in that second column where that first dot point is, that's our comment, is it, about this?
The second column is our comment, yes.
Yeah, council is supportive of the option for public notices to be published in a statewide or nationwide newspaper, but the way I read the second dot point in under proposal 1, that it must be the local online edition if there's a local paper, rather than supporting that other option.
Yep.
That doesn't even trigger, is that right?
Yes. Well, the way we haven't seen the final cut on that element, I don't think, but there would be several options available to councils depending upon the community. So, for example, in Mount Isa, they might still have a locally distributed paper.
I'm talking about Ipswich.
Yeah.
But so if what's approved is what's under proposal 1 with the 6 dot points, the only option for Ipswich would be the second dot point, because it says it must be used.
True, yeah. So I can adjust that second column because the way I've crafted the recommendation here is that we'll prepare a submission along the lines outlined in the report. So I can adjust that, or if you like, as a result of this meeting, before the council meeting, to include more detail on those requirements. I was looking at some other options that we could investigate as well to improve the community's awareness of projects, because if it's just in the electronic paper, I'm also concerned that how that will work with the paywall.
Well, that's a good point, and perhaps our submission should provide for, like it talks about the assessment manager's website. That's probably an easier way for the community to be able to see what's being proposed.
Yeah.
And that issue of a paywall is quite valid.
Yeah, so we had a very short time frame between the dropping of these amendments and getting the report together. So this is still a bit of work in progress, to be honest.
Through the chair.
Through the chair.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I was going to say, I agree, because this was discussed, I think, at ComSec recently, is not on the paywall, but can you imagine the costs of also advertising in could you say the Courier Mail or the Australian? And you can also imagine if every council decided to do this as well, you've got the newspaper will be this thick perhaps. So I am interested in making sure that we do have, so people are available to see it, so somewhere on a council website as well as in the Queensland online Queensland Times, I think is preferable.
We'll have a look at that.
Yeah, just through the chair, we need to make sure that we don't, the way it's worded, if they comply with, for example, that second dot point, they wouldn't have to, put it on or arrange for it to go onto our website as the assessment manager. We just need to be smart that alternative is probably a good alternative.
Yeah.
And maybe it's up to the council, each council, to decide exactly.
Yeah.
What is appropriate in their area.
Yeah.
What's appropriate in Ipswich won't be appropriate in Roma or Longreach or Mount Isa.
Yeah. I was thinking along the lines of submitting to this that there is a standard, and there is also an option for councils to go, well, this is the pro forma that we would like to use. This is the thing that works for our community, and that gives you the opportunity to adopt all or none or some or whatever the mix is, subject, of course, to the minister approving whatever that is. So we work on something like that. Then on to, I think, the economic recovery initiatives, which is the last part of that table. There are a series of changes the government have proposed. Now, we haven't seen legislation on this. This is just a series of dot points and sort of guide sheets to try and make some provision for new businesses and existing businesses to either start up or expand or recommence. And so I suppose in a nutshell, it's about having the ability to reuse businesses or reuse buildings for different businesses, establishing certain new businesses, certain minor extensions.
Sorry, through the chair. We've just sort of jumped ahead. Are we going to go through each of the proposals?
Yes, I thought I'd covered very briefly the planning scheme changes and the
sign on the land.
We'd gone back. I continue the public notification elements.
Is that okay?
Yep, that's fine.
Just go through sequentially. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So. We talked about the newspaper requirements. So the sign on the land, there is currently a pro forma for advertising developments on land with the sign that's actually posted on the land. So they're proposing some changes to that template to make it clearer. So we're supportive of making it clearer. We've just got some additional suggestions in there to try and reduce the clutter, because there is potentially a lot of content that they want on that sign, and also to flag that if a proposal goes to public notification and there's lots of submissions, it may change as a result of the submissions and the community won't necessarily see it again.
Through the Chair. Sometimes the sign on the land, they hide it, over in a back street or at the back of a property or something. Do they have to actually make it where people are going to drive past and see it?
No, it's about roads. So if a road, constructed or unconstructed, exists, they still have to put it on there. They still have to put it on the unconstructed roads. So I can flag that as an issue, but not all unconstructed roads are equal. So some are constructed and they'll have a footpath, some will have nothing and they'll be in the middle of bush. The vast majority of them do have, are in urban areas, so they do have some form of public access. So I think there is, in some cases, benefit. You could have a site that actually doesn't have a constructed road to it that this needs to happen. The alternative is you've got a very rural site that might have 15 or 16 unconstructed road frontages, and there's a big expense to the industry to do that. So, and then the final element
just through the Chair. Yes. There's no suggestion that they shouldn't change. Like if it's a dual road, unconstructed road and a main road, they've got to put it on both road frontages. They can't just put it in the bushland at the back.
No. Yeah, and I think that was the issue that Councillor Island was getting at, that at times signs are in the bush, not visible, potentially perceived as hidden, when in actual fact that's the requirement that they have to put a...
It happened up at the back of Redbank Plains at the beginning. People didn't know what was happening or what was going in, just because they hide them on the back fence.
Yeah, but they're required to do. They've got to put it on every road frontage.
Yeah, but they didn't. Well, the people didn't find it down the front.
Yeah, and there's always going to be some anomalies in these types of processes. So in an urban environment where you've got two street frontages and the frontages are quite narrow, it works. In a rural or undeveloped greenfield area where you've got frontages of 500 metres that require a four-wheel drive to get to them, that's going to be an issue, but they technically still have to put the sign there. The last element of that section was on the adjoining landowners, which I covered that it's land occupiers as well, so the residents can get notified of development, whereas previously the owners would. So tenants, for example, wouldn't get a notification, but landlords would. Then we get to the next section, which is about plan making and LGIP. So I suppose the core summary there is if there's a planning scheme change that warrants a change to our local government infrastructure plan, we can do an interim amendment to the local government infrastructure plan, which is potentially simpler than a full infrastructure plan. We don't really have any issue with that at a technical level. I don't foresee a need for it at this point in time, but...
Through the Chair, if I may, I notice it talks about critical infrastructure in Proposal 1. Would a waste to energy or an incinerator be considered critical infrastructure? Is there a list of definitions of critical infrastructure in that?
Yeah, there's a definition in the legislation about critical infrastructure, so really it applies to schools and those sorts of things. I haven't seen it applied to that waste kind of facility, but I can look at that a little bit closely. I don't think it could be applied, particularly if there's a commercial operator involved.
Okay. Would it apply to sporting complex or greyhound track or anything like that? Or
not to my knowledge, yeah. So you'd be more likely schools, roads, essential utilities, police, fire.
Thank you.
And then the final section is on the economic recovery initiatives, which I started earlier, about reuse of existing buildings for other businesses, minor extensions, and also in some contexts the establishment of new uses. And this is really to support either small business that are existing trying to recover, or it looks like new businesses establishing. Generally speaking, most of this stuff is already covered in the planning scheme in terms of the ability to do this in the right location, in the right zone, in the right building. There's probably some nuances we need to clarify with them on how we plan to regulate minor extensions to buildings, because there can be some consequences to that, particularly on character, for example. And there is a potential that in rural areas these could apply and facilitate some clearing of vegetation that may not be suitable for clearing. So we're going to propose to make some comments on that. All right, thank you.
The end of questions. Thank you. So we'll seek a mover on that one. Thank you, Mayor Harding, and a seconder. Councillor Doyle, thank you. Any further discussion? Everyone's happy? We'll take it to the vote. All those in favour? The vote's unanimous. Passed. Moving to the second last item for this afternoon, item number 27, and it's an adoption of a policy, the councillor briefing and workshops. Has anyone got any specific questions directed to? Yeah. So just to note that this policy entitled Councillor Briefings and Workshops, as per attachment 1, be adopted, and that's the recommendation that we're seeking endorsement of here this afternoon. Any discussion? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's really important as part of, again, being part of open and transparent, but that before we have these standing committee meetings, that the councillors do ask for council officers to give us briefings, and there are some times when we ask for workshops. So if we're looking at a policy, we wish to be quite hands-on, whereas briefings we're just, I guess, being briefed on the report, and we ask questions of the council officers beforehand. So I think it's a good to show that what are the workings behind these committee meetings, and being really clear with council staff, but also with the public and ourselves as to the difference between the two.
Vicky, do I have a mover there?
Oh.
No.
Sorry.
No, please move.
Can I?
That's okay, Mayor.
Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Jonick. And seconded by Mayor Harding. Thank you.
My apologies, Chair.
No, that's okay. Thanks. Any further discussion? Great. We'll take that to the vote. All those in favour? The vote's unanimous. Thank you. The last item for GPC is the Scenic Valleys Regional Roads Transport Group. We're seeking an Ipswich representative for the group. Would you like to hear the council officer speak more about this particular?
No, we just want to appoint someone.
We want to appoint it? Yeah, great. So I guess we will get a mover for this. We'll need to decide who that actually is. Is there any? Mayor?
Move, and I guess I'll move an amendment in that to nominate Councillor Milligan.
I second.
To that position. I think in particular Councillor Milligan's experience in Division 4 of rural roads would be make him an ideal person for this position.
Yep. So perfect, and that was seconded by Councillor Konzelman. Thanks, Vicky. Great. Any discussion on that? No. Thank you very much. We'll take that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you, Russell. Well done. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to fellow committee members, I thank you for your
endorsement.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, that brings the meeting to a close. The time is 12:38 p.m.
Thank you very much.